In the dust-swept town of Obsidian Gulch, a group of arrogant cattle barons made the catastrophic mistake of tormenting the silent barkeep at the Broken Spur. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. They couldn't have known that the unassuming man meticulously polishing whiskey glasses was once Ghost Rider Declan Frost, the most feared gunslinger in the West, with more confirmed kills than entire posses combined. Their cruel mockery was about to resurrect a phantom the frontier believed had vanished into legend 5 years ago, a man whose bullets never strayed, whose hands never trembled, and whose memory never failed. By sunrise, the cattle barons who survived would understand why lawmen once whispered his name with both reverence and dread. The evening wind pushed tumbleweeds down the main street of the Broken Spur, a high-end saloon perched on the edge of town, overlooking the vast prairie below. Outside, coyotes howled under a blanket of stars, while inside, the saloon's refined atmosphere was maintained through polished oak surfaces, brass railings, and the soft melody of a piano playing from the corner. The clientele was exclusive. Cattle barons, visiting dignitaries, old money ranchers, and new railroad tycoons, all drawn by the establishment's reputation for discretion, unparalleled service, and the finest spirits in the Western Territory. Behind the gleaming mahogany bar stood Declan Frost, a lean figure of indeterminate middle age, with steel-grey eyes that seemed to register everything while revealing nothing. His hands moved with hypnotic precision as he prepared a rare Kentucky bourbon, his movements economical and fluid, like a surgeon or a dancer, or perhaps something altogether more lethal. No motion was wasted, no gesture unnecessary, and when he poured the aged spirit into the crystal tumbler, the liquid cascaded exactly to the perfect mark, no measuring tools required. Olivia Chen, the elegant owner of the Broken Spur, observed him from near the service station, her sharp eyes missing nothing as she pretended to review something in her ledger. "Declan," she said, her voice pitched for his ears alone, "when was the last time you actually took a night off?" His lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but the closest approximation he ever displayed. "What would I do with a night off, Miss Chen?" he asked, his voice surprisingly soft, almost gentle. It was the kind of voice that made people lean, and closer to hear, the kind that made them instinctively underestimate the man behind it. "I don't know," Olivia replied, watching as he arranged a row of glasses with millimetric precision. "Whatever normal folks do." Declan's hands paused for just a moment, almost imperceptible to anyone not watching closely. "I stopped being normal a long time ago," he said, resuming his work with the same mechanical perfection that had become his signature. The saloon's patrons often commented on the bartender's hands, how steady they were, how they never seemed to shake even when pouring the most delicate concoctions. None of them suspected those same hands had once drawn revolvers in lightning-fast duels, or that those eyes had peered down rifle sights at targets over half a mile distant. At a corner table, partially obscured by a wooden column, sat Dr. Alexandra Winters, a distinguished physician with silver-streaked dark hair and penetrating eyes that seemed perpetually amused by a private joke. She sipped her neat whiskey while reviewing patient files on her lap, occasionally glancing at Declan with the knowing look of someone well acquainted with secrets. "Our special reserve of Kentucky bourbon arrived," Olivia mentioned casually, placing a supply list beside Declan. "The trader dropped it off earlier today." Declan nodded his acknowledgement, though everyone within earshot knew he hadn't touched liquor in the 5 years he'd worked at the Broken Spur. It was one of many small fictions they maintained about the bartender, like pretending not to notice. How he always positioned himself with clear sightlines to all entrances, or how his eyes constantly scanned the mirror behind the bar to monitor the room behind him. 5 years of serving drinks to the elite, and not once had anyone seen him take so much as a sip. 5 years of perfect drinks, perfect service, and perfect anonymity. Until tonight. The Dawson Ranch investment meeting at the town hall is wrapping up, Olivia mentioned, checking her pocket watch. Prepare for an influx in about 20 minutes. Declan's hands maintained their steady rhythm as he cleaned a set of glasses, but something in his demeanor shifted, a micro-adjustment most would miss entirely. Quarterly cattle sale announcement? He asked without looking up. Olivia tilted, her head slightly, still surprised after all this time by his awareness. Yes. How did you know? Prices dropped 18% at market, Declan replied simply. Their Texas Longhorn herd failed to meet the railroad contract requirements. The Territorial Telegraph covered it this morning. He placed a perfectly executed whiskey sour in front of a waiting patron, the lemon slice resting precisely on the rim. Some will want to celebrate surviving the cull. Others will be drowning sorrows before updating their prospects tomorrow. Olivia shook her head slightly. Sometimes I forget how much you notice. Dr. Winters approached the bar, setting her empty glass down with deliberate care. Another scotch, Declan, and don't forget those herbal remedies I left with Olivia. Your insomnia won't improve if you neglect your medicine. Declan nodded politely, though everyone present knew he hadn't complained of sleep issues in all the years they'd known him. It was just another fiction they collectively maintained, like the bullet wounds he never discussed, or the nightmares he never mentioned. As Declan turned to prepare the doctor's drink, the sleeve of his impeccably pressed white shirt rose slightly, revealing the edge of an unusual scar, a perfect circular pattern that resembled a burn, but wasn't. He adjusted his cuff with practiced efficiency, but not before Dr. Winters had catalogued the mark with clinical interest. "The weather change bothering your old injury?" she asked quietly. Declan's expression remained impassive as he poured scotch. "With surgical precision. Only when it rains," he replied, a statement that might have been mistaken for ordinary small talk by anyone who didn't know better. The swinging doors opened with a creak of hinges, admitting a gust of prairie wind, and Sheriff Naomi Sullivan, a formidable woman in her 40s, with the unmistakable bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Her tailored riding outfit couldn't quite disguise the military precision of her posture, and those familiar with lawmen would recognize the subtle bulge of a Colt revolver beneath her jacket. She claimed a seat at the far end of the bar, positioning herself for optimal surveillance of the entire saloon. Declan moved to her position without being summoned, placing a water with lime before her, her usual. "Sheriff," he acknowledged, his voice neutral. "Frost," she replied with equal restraint. The exchange needed no elaboration. Their history remained unspoken, yet present, like a third party at the bar between them. Sullivan's eyes conducted a practiced sweep of the room, a habit formed through decades of threat assessment. "Quiet evening," she observed, though her tone suggested she expected this status to change. "Not for long," Declan replied, his gaze briefly flicking toward the entrance before returning to the glass he was polishing. Sullivan followed his line of sight, her body subtly tensing in response to his alertness. "You expecting trouble?" She asked, her hand unconsciously shifting closer to her concealed weapon. Declan's expression remained unchanged. "Just customers," he said. But something in his tone made Sullivan straighten imperceptibly in her seat. The entrance opened again, this time admitting a cacophony that shattered the saloon's cultivated ambiance. 6 men in expensive trail clothes entered, their loud laughter and domineering presence immediately transforming the space. Their ringleader, Vincent Davenport, moved with the arrogant confidence of someone who considered the world his personal hunting ground. Tall, expensively groomed, with a smile that never reached his cold eyes, he surveyed the saloon like a predator assessing potential prey. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. Behind him followed his entourage, ranch managers, cattle buyers, and financial backers of Dawson Ranch, all united by their excessive wealth and evident disdain for those they deemed beneath them. Olivia straightened, her professional mask sliding into place as she prepared to manage what was clearly going to be a challenging group. "Dawson Ranch," she murmured under her breath, "right on schedule." Declan continued polishing glassware, his rhythm unbroken, but those who knew him well might have noticed a subtle shift in his posture, a coiling of potential energy so slight it was almost imperceptible. Dr. Winters observed this change with quiet interest, her eyes narrowing as she registered Declan's almost invisible transformation. The ranchers commandeered the largest seating area, displacing two other patrons with casual entitlement. Davenport snapped his fingers imperiously, the gesture both demanding and dismissive. "Service!" he called out, not bothering to modulate his voice. "Your most expensive bottle of whiskey, the 30-year reserve, and glasses for my men." Olivia moved to intercept what was clearly developing into a problematic situation, but Declan placed a gentle hand on her arm, stilling her advance. "I'll handle it," he said, his soft voice carrying an unfamiliar undertone that made her hesitate before nodding her assent. He moved from behind the bar with unexpected grace for someone of his height, silent and efficient, like a mountain lion across prairie. "Grass." As he approached the group's table, Davenport looked up, taking in Declan's unassuming appearance with obvious dismissal. "We need your best bottle," he repeated, not bothering to make eye contact. "Not whatever rotgut you serve the cowhands. The real stuff." Declan stood perfectly still, his posture relaxed yet somehow perfectly balanced. "We have the McCready 25-year reserve," he replied, his voice barely audible above the group's continued conversation. One of the ranchers, Jackson Pierce, a heavy-set man with an aggressively square jaw, sneered openly. "He said the 30-year. What part of that didn't compute?" Another, Elliot Quinn, younger but equally arrogant, laughed derisively. "Look at him. Probably couldn't tell good whiskey from horse liniment." The group's laughter was performative, designed to establish dominance through humiliation. Declan remained motionless, his expression unchanged, though Sheriff Sullivan, watching from her position at the bar, noticed how his weight shifted almost imperceptibly to the balls of his feet, a gunfighter's stance disguised as casual posture. "The 25-year is $50 per glass," Declan stated calmly. "The bottle is $780. His eyes, when they finally met Davenport's, were cold and still as winter ponds. Davenport made a dismissive gesture with his gold-plated money clip. "Did I ask for the price tag? Just bring the bottle." His tone conveyed absolute certainty that his wealth entitled him to instant obedience. "And some of those fancy ice chips. The real ones, not the chunks from the ice house." "Very well," Declan replied, his voice betraying nothing of what might be happening behind those steel-grey eyes. As he turned to retrieve the requested items, Pierce called after him, "And try not to drop it. That bottle probably costs more than you make in a year." Their laughter followed him back to the bar, but Declan's movements remained fluid and precise, unaffected by their mockery. He unlocked the cabinet containing the premium spirits, handling the McCready with respectful care that bordered on reverence. "Sheriff." Sullivan leaned slightly toward Olivia, who had positioned herself nearby. "Those boys always this charming?" she asked, her voice laden with sarcasm. Olivia's smile was tight and professional. "Worse when the market turns against them," she replied. "They're down 18% and looking for someone to make feel smaller than they do right now." Sullivan's gaze tracked Declan as he arranged the whiskey and appropriate glassware on a silver tray. "They picked the wrong target," she murmured, almost to herself. When Declan returned to the table with their order, Davenport was mid-anecdote, his voice deliberately projected to fill the space. told the territorial marshal he could examine. "Our books when hell freezes over," he boasted. "These government watchdogs don't understand how the real world operates. They're just failed ranchers who couldn't hack it in the private sector." His companions laughed obligingly, their sycophantic response clearly practiced. As Declan began to arrange the glassware with methodical precision, Davenport suddenly grabbed his wrist, the gesture both proprietary and invasive. "You agree with me, don't you, barkeep?" he demanded, his fingers digging into Declan's flesh with unnecessary force. "Government lawmen are just jealous of success. They want to tear down anyone who's built something meaningful." For a split second, the entire saloon seemed to freeze. Dr. Winters set down her papers. Olivia's body tensed. Visibly, Sheriff Sullivan's hand moved fractionally closer to her concealed weapon, but Declan simply extricated his wrist with a movement so smooth it almost appeared that Davenport had released him voluntarily. "I wouldn't know, sir," he replied, his voice still quiet, still controlled. "I just tend bar." But something had changed in his eyes, a coldness, a focus, like the adjustment of a rifle sight. To most observers, he remained the same unassuming bartender, but to those who knew what to look for, something lethal had awakened behind that carefully maintained facade. Dr. Winters caught Sheriff Sullivan's eye across the room, a silent communication passing between them. They alone recognized the microscopic tells in Declan's demeanor, the slight adjustment in his stance, the barely perceptible tension in his shoulders, the way his breathing had slowed and deepened. These were the preparation patterns of a predator who had spent decades perfecting the art of appearing harmless until the moment to strike. Quinn, emboldened by alcohol and Davenport's example, reached out and deliberately knocked over an empty glass. "Oops," he said with mock contrition. "Guess you'll have to clean that up." The glass rolled toward the edge of the table, and with a movement too quick to follow properly, Declan caught it before it could fall and shatter. The catch was so smooth, so precise, that it appeared almost superhuman. A flash of the extraordinary reflexes he usually took such care to conceal, Pierce noticed, his eyebrows drawing together in momentary confusion. "Nice catch," he said, suspicion coloring his tone. "Do a lot of juggling in your spare time?" Declan placed the glass back on the tray with deliberate care. "No, sir," he replied evenly. "Just don't like to waste good crystal." He continued pouring the whiskey with flawless precision, each glass receiving exactly the same measure without the use of a shot glass or any visible counting method. Davenport watched this display of unwavering accuracy with growing irritation, as if the bartender's competence was somehow a personal affront. "You know what I hate?" he asked his companions, though his eyes remained fixed on Declan. "People who don't know their place." He raised his glass, examining the amber liquid against the lamplight. "Society functions because everyone understands the hierarchy. Some lead, others follow, some give orders." He took a deliberate sip, then set the glass down with excessive force. "And others are born to take them." The silence that followed was pregnant with tension, but Declan's expression remained neutral, his posture unchanged. "Will there be anything else, sir?" he asked, his voice still soft, still controlled. Davenport's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Actually, yes," he replied, reaching into his vest pocket and extracting a thick envelope. "Here's $100, he said, tossing it carelessly onto the tray. "I want you to tell us the most interesting thing that's ever happened to you, and make it good. We're paying premium rates for the entertainment." The envelope landed with a soft thud, the cash partially visible inside. The casual cruelty of the gesture hung in the air, a deliberate attempt to transform a human being into a performing animal. Dr. Winters set down her glass with excessive care. Olivia's knuckles whitened around her ledger. Sheriff Sullivan's Posture shifted subtly into what those with tactical training would recognize as a pre-engagement stance. But Declan only looked at the envelope, then at Davenport, his gaze steady and unreadable. "I'm afraid I don't have many interesting stories, sir," he said, each word measured and precise. "Just a bartender." He made no move to take the money, his hands remaining perfectly still at his sides. Something dangerous flickered across Davenport's face, the expression of a man unaccustomed to being denied. "Everyone has at least one good story," he insisted, his voice hardening. "Even someone like you." The disdain in his tone was unmistakable, but still Declan remained impassive. "My apologies, sir," he replied, "but I'm needed back at the bar." As he turned to leave, Pierce reached out and grabbed his arm, this time with enough force to wrinkle the immaculate white shirt. "My boss asked you a question," he said, alcohol emboldening his aggression. "The polite thing would be to answer." For the briefest moment, something changed in Declan's eyes, a calculation so rapid it was almost subliminal, an assessment of angles, distances and vulnerabilities that only Sheriff Sullivan recognized for what it was. Then it was gone, submerged, beneath his carefully maintained facade of civility. "Perhaps another time," he said gently but firmly, removing Pierce's hand from his arm with a technique that looked natural but would have made frontier marshals nod in appreciation. As Declan walked away, Davenport's voice followed him, pitched, to carry across the now hushed saloon. "See that?" he announced to his companions. "No ambition, no spine. That's why some people spend their lives serving drinks instead of making history." He raised his glass in a mocking toast. "To the invisible, men of the West, may they continue to know their place." Back behind the bar, Declan resumed his methodical cleaning of glassware, his movements as precise as ever. But those who knew him best observed the minute changes, the slight tightening around his eyes, the barely perceptible tension in his shoulders, the way his scanning of the room had intensified in frequency and focus. Dr. Winters approached the bar, ostensibly to order another drink, positioning herself to speak privately. "Your control is admirable," she murmured, her voice pitched for his ears alone, "but I know what it costs you." Declan's hands didn't pause in their work, but his eyes met hers briefly in the mirror behind the bar. "Some costs are necessary," he replied, arranging stemware in perfect alignment. Dr. Winters studied him with clinical detachment. "The techniques we discussed, are they helping?" This was part of their public fiction, the pretense that she was merely his physician, treating ordinary trauma. The reality of their connection ran much deeper. "Yes," he said simply, though both knew it was a lie. The techniques weren't for managing ordinary stress or anxiety. They were protocols developed for gunmen like him, methods to compartmentalize and contain the lethal instincts that had been honed through decades of specialized training. Sheriff Sullivan had moved closer as well, positioning herself to create a triangle of conversation shielded from curious eyes. "They're just drunk fools with too much money," she said quietly, "not worth the complications." What remained unspoken was clear to all three. Not worth revealing who you really are, not worth the aftermath, not worth the bodies. Declan's nod was almost imperceptible. "I know," he replied, his voice revealing nothing of the calculations. Undoubtedly running behind those steel-grey eyes. "Just tending bar, Sheriff, nothing more." From across the saloon, Vincent Davenport watched this quiet exchange with growing suspicion, his intuition, honed through years of corporate predation, sensing something unusual in the bartender's demeanor. Unlike his companions, who had already dismissed Declan as insignificant, Davenport possessed the predator's recognition of another dangerous creature. As the evening progressed toward its inevitable collision course, no one in the Broken Spur Who could have predicted how fatally the arrogant ranchers had miscalculated? By targeting the quiet bartender with the steady hands and watchful eyes, they had unwittingly challenged a man whose name had once been whispered with fear in the shadowed corners of frontier towns, a man who had spent 5 years burying Ghost Rider beneath layers of careful anonymity, only to find that some legends refuse to remain in the grave where you left them. The night deepened as a storm front moved in, casting sheets of rain against the windows of the broken spur. Lightning occasionally illuminated the prairie in stark relief, followed by the rumble of thunder that vibrated through the saloon's wooden frame. The Dawson Ranch executives had grown progressively louder and more demanding, their initial arrogance curdling into something uglier as the evening wore on. They were on their second bottle of premium whiskey, the first having been drained with performative excess. Davenport had even poured a measure onto the floor, claiming it wasn't smooth enough for his palate, all while maintaining eye contact with Declan. 3 other patrons had already requested their bills, quietly departing rather than endure the increasingly toxic atmosphere. Olivia Chen's professional smile had calcified into something rigid and brittle as she monitored the situation from near the piano, where she pretended to review sheet music while actually keeping watch over her establishment. Sheriff Sullivan remained at her post at the bar, nursing the same water she'd been sipping for the past hour, her trained eyes systematically scanning the room in established patterns. Threat assessment disguised as casual observation. "My theory," Davenport announced to his captive audience, his voice deliberately pitched to carry throughout the saloon, "is that society is divided into wolves and sheep. And once you understand which category you belong to, everything else makes perfect sense." He raised his glass in a mocking toast toward where Declan stood behind the bar, meticulously preparing a complex cocktail for one of the few remaining. "Patrons. Most people are born to follow, to serve. They lack the killer instinct required to truly succeed." Something shifted in Dr. Winter's expression as she overheard this, a micro-expression of ironic amusement that vanished almost instantly. If Davenport only knew who he was attempting to belittle, how profoundly he was misreading the room. The doctor caught Sheriff Sullivan's eye across the space, a silent communication passing between them. Sullivan gave an almost imperceptible headshake. "Not yet. Let it play out." The tension was interrupted by the arrival of a striking woman in her 30s, Maya Delgado, her dark hair swept into an elegant braid, her tailored riding clothes suggesting wealth and authority. She scanned the saloon briefly before her eyes locked on Davenport's group. Her expression tightened with unmistakable displeasure as she approached their table. "Vincent," she said, her voice cool and controlled, "I've been looking for you. The investors' meeting starts in 30 minutes, and we need to finalize our strategy." Davenport waved dismissively without bothering to stand. Maya, always so serious. "Join us for a drink. The quarterly numbers are what they are. No amount of strategy will change them now." He patted the seat beside him with proprietary familiarity. "Besides, we're conducting some fascinating sociological research on the serving class." His companions laughed on cue, the sound brittle and forced. Maya remained standing, her posture rigid with barely contained frustration. "We lost 800,000 in cattle value today. The investors deserve better than drunken philosophizing." Her gaze swept across the table, taking in the expensive whiskey and the disheveled appearance of the ranchers. "And Ellison is arriving tomorrow morning for his audit. We need to be prepared." The name Ellison sent a visible ripple through the group. Elliot Quinn straightened slightly in his chair, while Pierce's laughter cut off abruptly. Only Davenport seemed unaffected, though something hardened in his eyes. "Alexander Ellison can wait like everyone else," he said. "But there, was a new edge to his voice that hadn't been there before. "I'm not rearranging my schedule for some government pencil pusher." Declan, who had been wiping down the bar counter with methodical precision, paused almost imperceptibly at the mention of Ellison's name. The hesitation lasted less than half a second, unnoticeable to anyone who wasn't specifically watching for it, before he resumed his work. But Sheriff Sullivan had caught it, her eyes narrowing slightly as she registered the micro-reaction. She shifted on her bar stool, angling herself to better observe the unfolding scene while maintaining a clear sightline to Declan. "You know perfectly." "Well, that Ellison isn't just some pencil pusher," Maya retorted, keeping her voice low but intense. "Territorial auditors don't make surprise visits for routine matters. If he finds irregularities in our Kansas City transfers, that's enough." Davenport cut her off sharply, his casual demeanor evaporating. "We'll discuss this privately." He glanced around, suddenly aware of potential listeners, his gaze pausing briefly on Sheriff Sullivan before moving on. "For now, either join us or leave us to our entertainment." Maya hesitated, professional responsibility warring with evident frustration, before claiming an empty chair at the table. 20 minutes, she conceded. "Then we need to prepare for the meeting." She declined the whiskey Davenport attempted to pour for her, requesting water instead. Her arrival had shifted the dynamic of the group, introducing an element of tension that hadn't been present before. The name Ellison hung in the air like an unspoken threat. Across the saloon, Dr. Winters had casually shifted positions, moving to a table that provided a better view of both the rancher group and Declan. Her movements appeared natural, but to trained eyes, it was clear she was establishing tactical positioning. Similarly, Olivia Chen had migrated to the service station nearest the bar, ostensibly to check inventory, but actually placing herself within whispering distance of Declan. "Alexander Ellison," she murmured, her voice pitched for his ears alone as she pretended to review a ledger. "Territorial auditor? Any connection to your previous work?" The question was deliberately vague, phrased to sound innocuous to any eavesdroppers. While conveying much more to its intended recipient, Declan continued arranging glassware with mechanical precision, his expression unchanged. "Specialized in fraud prosecution before he moved to the territorial office," he replied, his voice equally low. "Highest conviction rate in the territory's history." What remained unspoken was clear. Declan knew Ellison, perhaps intimately, from his former life. This wasn't just background knowledge, it was personal intelligence. Across the room, Davenport had resumed his performative grandstanding, though with noticeably less enthusiasm than before Maya's arrival. "As I was saying before being interrupted," he announced, shooting Maya a pointed look, "the difference between leaders and followers is the willingness to do whatever it takes to win." He raised his glass. "To making the hard decisions that separate the extraordinary from the ordinary." The atmosphere in the Broken Spur had shifted subtly but unmistakably. What had begun as a simple case of wealthy patrons behaving badly had crystallized into something more complex. Potential financial crimes, a territorial investigation, and the simmering threat of exposure. Sheriff Sullivan had straightened, almost imperceptibly in her seat, her casual pose becoming more alert. Whatever was unfolding here had moved beyond mere boorish behavior into the realm of actual criminality. "Your water, Miss Delgado," Declan said quietly, having appeared at the rancher's table with the requested drink. His movement had been so fluid, so unobtrusive, that several of the group started in surprise at his sudden presence. Maya accepted, the glass with a polite nod, her eyes briefly scanning Declan's face with the automatic assessment of someone accustomed to evaluating people quickly. "Efficient service," she commented, her tone neutral, but her gaze lingering a moment longer than necessary. Something in Declan's bearing or appearance had caught her attention, Perhaps the military precision of his posture that he couldn't entirely disguise, or the watchful alertness in his eyes that spoke of professional training. "Just doing my job, ma'am," Declan replied, his voice maintaining that soft, almost gentle quality that required people to listen carefully to hear him. As he turned to leave, Davenport's hand shot out, catching his sleeve. "Wait just a minute," he said, alcohol and irritation roughening his voice. "I'm curious about something." He released Declan's sleeve but gestured for him to remain. "You seem different from most barkeeps I encounter. More observant, more precise." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Military background?" The question hung in the air, seemingly innocent but laden with unforeseen danger. Sheriff Sullivan's hand moved fractionally closer to her concealed weapon, while Dr. Winters set down her drink with deliberate care. Olivia Chen froze in place at the service station, her body tensing visibly. Declan's expression remained neutral, his posture relaxed, yet somehow perfectly balanced. "I've had various jobs," he answered, the non-response perfectly calibrated, to neither confirm nor deny. Davenport wasn't satisfied, his predatory instincts aroused by the evasion. "Cavalry sharpshooter, I'd wager," he pressed, studying Declan with new interest. "You've got that look, the economy of movement, the situational awareness." He glanced at his companions. "My brother was with the Texas Rangers. I recognize the signs." This last statement carried an unmistakable threat. "I know what you are." Before Declan could respond, the swinging doors creaked open, admitting a gust of rain-soaked wind and three newcomers whose appearance immediately changed the atmosphere of the entire saloon. They moved with the coordinated precision of men who had ridden together extensively. 2 men and a woman, all in their 30s, all wearing trail clothes that couldn't quite disguise the athletic builds beneath. Their eyes conducted synchronized sweeps of the space, cataloging exits, potential threats, and civilian presence with mechanical efficiency. The leader, a tall man with close-cropped dark hair and the rigid posture of someone who had spent significant time in military service, nodded respectfully to Sheriff Sullivan as they passed her position. She returned the acknowledgement with equal restraint, a silent communication between professionals. The trio claimed a table near the bar, positioning themselves with clear sightlines to both the entrance and the rancher group. "Your most expensive bottle of whiskey," the leader requested when Olivia approached their table. "We're celebrating tonight." His accent was faintly European, Russian, perhaps, though meticulously suppressed. His companions remained silent, their attention focused outward rather than on each other, maintaining vigilance rather than the social engagement typical of celebratory gatherings. Declan, still standing near Davenport's table, had gone very still. To the untrained eye, his posture appeared unchanged, but Sheriff Sullivan recognized the subtle shift in his stance, the microsecond calculations, the combat readiness disguised as casual attention. He had recognized the newcomers, or at least their type, and had classified them as threats. "Friends of yours?" Davenport asked Maya, who had also noticed the new arrivals with evident unease. She shook her head slightly, her expression tightening. "Territorial agents, perhaps?" Davenport continued, his attempt at humor falling flat as concern crept into his voice. "Here, to preview tomorrow's audit?" "The territory doesn't operate that way," Maya replied, her eyes still fixed on the newcomers. "And those aren't federal agents." She didn't elaborate on how she could be so certain, but her assessment aligned with Declan's silent conclusion. These were something else entirely, hired guns perhaps, or foreign operatives. Their presence transformed what had already been a tense situation into something potentially volatile. "Excuse me," Declan said quietly, extricating himself from Davenport's table with fluid precision. He returned to the bar, his movements measured and deliberate as he began preparing whiskey service for the new arrivals. Sheriff Sullivan shifted position, angling herself to maintain visual contact with both Declan and the newcomers, while keeping the rancher group in her peripheral vision. "Problems?" Dr. Winters asked as she approached the bar, ostensibly to order another drink, but actually creating an opportunity for quiet communication. Her voice was pitched for Declan's ears alone, her back to the room providing privacy. "Zephyr Gang," Declan replied, the name barely audible as he arranged whiskey glasses with meticulous care. The identification was significant enough that Dr. Winters's hands stilled momentarily on her medical bag. Zephyr Gang was a group of hired guns known for operating outside the law, deniable operations, ranch wars, and occasionally targeted eliminations. "Certain?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Declan wouldn't make such an identification without absolute confidence. He gave an almost imperceptible nod as he placed whiskey onto a silver tray. "Anton Karlov," he murmured, identifying the leader with the European accent. "Former Russian cavalry. Specialized in high-value extraction and elimination. The others are part of his gang." The information was delivered with clinical detachment, but underlying it was an unmistakable tension. These weren't random hired guns, but specific operatives with whom Declan had prior history. As Declan moved to deliver the whiskey to the newcomers' table, the storm outside intensified. Lightning, flashing across the prairie landscape in brilliant pulses. The electrical display painted everyone in stark relief for brief moments. Davenport's group, with their mounting anxiety, Sheriff Sullivan's coiled readiness, Dr. Winters's calculating observation, and the Zephyr operative's predatory alertness. "Your whiskey," Declan said, placing the bottle and glasses on their table with precise movements. Karlov looked up, his eyes meeting Declan's for the first time. For a moment, nothing happened. A frozen tableau of recognition as the two men assessed each other with the cold calculation of apex predators encountering an unexpected rival. "Thank you," Karlov said finally, his tone neutral but his gaze unwavering. "Been working here long?" The question was casual, conversational, but laden with significance. He was confirming what he already suspected, that the unassuming bartender was indeed who he appeared to be. 5 years, Declan replied, his voice maintaining that soft quality that had become his signature. Nothing in his demeanor revealed the rapid tactical assessments undoubtedly racing through his mind. Angles, distances, available weapons, civilian presence. "Can I get you anything else?" Karlov smiled, a cold, practiced expression that never reached his eyes. "For now, this is sufficient, but I suspect we'll require more specialized service before the night is over." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable, coded in language that only someone with their shared background would fully comprehend. Declan nodded politely and withdrew, returning to the bar with the same measured pace he always maintained. But something had fundamentally changed in the atmosphere of the Broken Spur. What had begun as an evening of boorish ranchers harassing staff had evolved into something far more dangerous. A convergence of financial crimes, government investigation, and professional gunmen with unknown objectives. Sheriff Sullivan abandoned all pretense of casualness, moving to intercept Declan at the bar. "Zephyr doesn't ride without specific targets," she said, her voice low and urgent. "Who are they here for?" The question contained a wealth of unspoken context, their shared history, classified operations, and the understanding that Sullivan herself might be connected to whatever was unfolding. "Multiple possibilities," Declan replied as he methodically dried the bar surface with a pristine cloth. "Territorial investigation, financial improprieties, corporate extraction." He paused, his eyes briefly meeting Sullivan's. "Or me?" The possibility hung between them, that Karlov's gang had identified Ghost Rider after 5 years of anonymity. that they were here specifically to eliminate a legendary gunman whose skills and knowledge made him perpetually valuable or dangerous, depending on one's perspective. Sullivan's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Options?" she asked, the single word encompassing complex tactical considerations. Declan's gaze conducted another sweep of the saloon, cataloguing positions, vulnerabilities, and potential scenarios with practiced efficiency. Limited, he admitted. High civilian presence, restricted exit routes, unknown objectives. His eyes tracked Karloff's team as they maintained their vigilance while pretending to celebrate with whiskey. "For now, we observe." Across the saloon, Maya Delgado had risen from the rancher's table, her patience clearly exhausted. 20 minutes have passed, she informed Davenport, her tone leaving no room for argument. "The investors' call begins in 10. We need to prepare." Her presence had introduced an unexpected variable, a corporate executive with apparently legitimate concerns about financial misconduct, distinct from Davenport's more cavalier attitude. "Always so serious," Davenport sighed theatrically, but he rose to his feet nonetheless, straightening his custom leather vest with practiced nonchalance. "Gentlemen, duty calls. Let's continue our philosophical explorations afterward." The other ranchers stood as well, though with noticeably less enthusiasm than earlier in the evening. The mention of Ellison and tomorrow's audit had cast a shadow over their revelry. As they gathered their belongings, Pierce leaned over to speak privately with Davenport. "Should we be concerned about Ellison's visit?" he asked, his voice pitched low, but still audible to Declan's trained hearing. "The Kansas City transfers weren't exactly standard procedure." Davenport's expression hardened momentarily before his practiced smile returned. "Everything's been handled," he assured his colleague with forced confidence. "By this time tomorrow, our audit concerns will be permanently resolved." Something in his phrasing, in the cold certainty behind his words, suggested that resolution might involve measures beyond normal business procedures. The rancher group moved toward the exit, Maya leading the way with evident relief at extracting them from the situation. As they passed the bar, Davenport paused, turning to face Declan with renewed interest. "You never answered my question," he said, his earlier mockery replaced by genuine curiosity. "Cavalry sharpshooter, wasn't it? You have that look." Declan continued wiping glasses with mechanical precision, his expression giving nothing away. "Just a bartender, sir," he replied, his voice soft and controlled. "Nothing more." But the words carried an undertone that Sheriff Sullivan recognized immediately, the particular cadence that Ghost Rider had always used before an operation, the calm before the storm. Davenport studied him for a moment longer, his predatory instincts clearly unsatisfied by the response. "Somehow I doubt that," he said finally, "but we all have our secrets, don't we?" He placed a gold eagle on the bar, an ostentatious tip that was simultaneously generous and insulting. "Until next time." With that, he followed his group toward the exit, leaving the gold coin untouched on the polished surface. As the ranchers departed, Karloff's team shifted positions subtly, maintaining visual contact with them while simultaneously keeping awareness of Declan's location behind the bar. The coordinated movement confirmed what Declan had already suspected. The Zephyr operatives were here on a specific mission related to Dawson Ranch, not for him personally. That realization provided critical tactical information, but it didn't diminish the danger. Professional gunmen like Karloff wouldn't hesitate to eliminate witnesses or complications. "They're following Davenport," Sheriff Sullivan observed quietly, having shifted position to maintain sightlines to the entrance. "Corporate extraction, perhaps? Or elimination?" The question wasn't just procedural, it carried ethical implications. If Karloff's team was here to abduct or kill Davenport, did they have a responsibility to intervene, regardless of the rancher's apparent criminality? Before Declan could respond, the storm outside intensified dramatically, a massive lightning strike hitting nearby with a thunderclap so violent it momentarily extinguished the saloon's oil lamps. In that brief moment of darkness and confusion, Karlov's team moved with practiced coordination, rising from their table and proceeding toward the exit in tactical formation. As the lamps were relit, Declan made eye contact with Sheriff Sullivan, a silent communication passing between them. Whatever was about to happen would occur soon, and they needed to decide their involvement. Sullivan's expression was conflicted, her duty as a law enforcement official warring with the complications of what was clearly an operation beyond normal jurisdiction. If Davenport is involved in financial crimes serious enough to attract territorial attention and Zephyr operatives, there's more at stake than corporate malfeasance, Dr. Winters pointed out as she joined them at the bar, forming a triangle of quiet consultation. Gun running, horse thievery, those would explain the level of resources deployed. Declan's expression remained impassive, but his eyes had taken on the particular focus that both women recognized from his former life. The complete situational awareness, the continuous calculation of variables, the preparation for imminent action. 5 years of peace and anonymity were unraveling before them, forced by circumstances beyond his control. "I know Alexander Ellison," he said finally, the admission significant enough that both women stilled momentarily. "We worked adjacent operations in the past. If he's personally conducting this audit, the potential crimes extend well beyond typical fraud." The implication was clear. Whatever Davenport and Dawson Ranch were involved in had territorial security implications, and Karlov's team was here to either extract critical players or eliminate them before they could testify. The situation had evolved from mere observation to potential intervention. "Your call," Sheriff Sullivan said quietly, acknowledging Declan's superior experience with these specific operators. "But if we act, we burn your cover completely. 5 years of anonymity gone." The cost was substantial. Ghost Rider would re-emerge from the shadows, with all the complications and dangers that identity carried. Declan's hands finally stilled. On the glass he'd been polishing, his decision reflected in the slight adjustment of his posture. "Some cover isn't worth the cost of maintaining it," he said simply. Sullivan checked her Colt revolver with practiced efficiency, then secured additional ammunition to her tactical belt. "Territorial investigation implies financial crimes with security implications," she noted, thinking through the scenario aloud. If Davenport and his group are involved in gun running or horse theft, Ellison's audit could expose operations beyond Dawson Ranch. Her analysis was methodical, connecting the disparate elements into a coherent picture. Karlov's team might be here to eliminate witnesses, destroy evidence, or extract key personnel before they can testify. "Maya Delgado," Declan said suddenly, a new element clicking into place in his mental framework. Her concern seemed genuine. She might be cooperating with the territory. The observation was significant. If Maya was working with investigators, she could be the primary target for Karlov's team rather than Davenport himself. Olivia returned from securing the civilian patrons, her elegant evening attire incongruous with the tactical preparations underway at her establishment. "Civilians are secured in the root cellar," she reported, her composure remarkable under the circumstances. "Town security has been advised of a systems test to explain the protocol activation." She moved behind the bar with practiced ease, accessing a concealed panel that revealed a sophisticated communications array. "I've established secure monitoring of all security positions in the building. Karlov's team is currently on Main Street, approaching the Mercantile Building." The map shifted to show their position, tracking their movement through the town. Davenport's group is already in the executive office, Olivia continued, bringing up another security report from her informant that showed the Dawson Ranch executives entering a large conference room. They appear to be preparing for their investors' meeting. The report showed Maya arranging documents, while Davenport and the others reluctantly took positions around a large table. "That doesn't make sense," Sullivan observed, her brow furrowing. "Why would Karloff's team allow them to proceed with a legitimate business meeting if their objective is extraction or elimination?" The inconsistency suggested there were variables they hadn't yet identified, elements of the operation beyond their current understanding. Declan studied the map with absolute focus, his eyes calculating distances, angles, and tactical approaches. "Unless the investors' meeting is the objective," he suggested, the pieces aligning in a new configuration in his mind. Financial crimes at this level often involve multiple conspirators. If Dawson Ranch is facilitating illicit transactions, the investors might be complicit. The implication was clear. Perhaps Karloff's team wasn't targeting the executives, but rather using their presence to access the investors' meeting itself. "Motive?" Dr. Winters asked, applying her analytical training to the unfolding situation. What would Zephyr Gang gain from accessing a corporate meeting? Her question cut to the heart of the matter. Understanding the underlying objectives would be crucial for anticipating Karloff's next moves. "Information," Declan replied, his eyes still fixed on the map. "Or disinformation. If Dawson Ranch is facing territorial investigation for illicit financial activities, controlling the narrative becomes crucial." He manipulated the map display, bringing up structural details of the executive floor. They could be planning to intercept the meeting, alter financial disclosures, or eliminate specific investors remotely. Sullivan nodded, the scenario aligning with her experience in financial crimes enforcement. "Character assassination," she agreed. "Discredit key witnesses before they can testify. It's cleaner than physical elimination and often more effective. In high-profile cases," she checked her tactical equipment one final time, "we need to move now if we're going to establish position before they implement whatever they're planning." Declan made a final adjustment to his assembled weapon system, a modified Winchester, that could be configured for various engagement parameters. Though designed primarily for long-range applications, the current configuration was optimized for the confined environment of the town buildings. "Olivia," he said, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of command, "maintain surveillance and communications. Alert us to any changes in Karloff's deployment or town security status." Olivia nodded, taking position at the communications array with professional efficiency. "Secure channel established," she confirmed, distributing specialized earpieces to the operational team. "Town lookouts are under our control. I'll monitor all movements and provide real-time updates." As Declan, Sullivan, and Dr. Winters moved toward the service entrance at the rear of the broken spur, the storm outside reached new intensity. A massive lightning strike illuminating the entire town for a brief, brilliant moment. In that flash, Declan's expression was revealed with stark clarity. Not the cold killer that legends portrayed, nor the unassuming bartender he'd pretended to be for 5 years, but something more complex. A professional assessing variables, calculating risks, and preparing to re-engage with a world he'd deliberately left behind. The service alley connected the broken spur to the town's main thoroughfare, providing access routes that bypassed standard security checkpoints. Declan moved with silent efficiency, his footfalls virtually noiseless despite the muddy ground. Sullivan followed with similar tactical discipline, while Dr. Winters maintained positions slightly behind them, her medical kit secured at her side. They proceeded toward a service entrance that would provide direct access to the rear of the mercantile building. a tactical approach that would allow them to establish observation position without immediately revealing their presence. Karloff's. A team has reached the mercantile building, Olivia's voice reported through their earpieces. They're not proceeding directly to the executive suite. Instead, they're accessing the document room adjacent to the conference area. The information confirmed Declan's theory. This wasn't a straightforward extraction or elimination, but something more sophisticated involving the business documents. Composition, Declan inquired as they entered the service entrance, his question seeking details on Karloff's tactical deployment. Sullivan inserted a specialized key that overrode the entrance's standard locking mechanism, allowing direct access to the back stairs. Three-person team maintaining tactical spread, Olivia reported. Karloff is directing while the woman, I recognize her as Vera Petrov, former Siberian horse thief, is accessing the document safes. The third team member is establishing perimeter security with coverage of all access points to the executive suite. The stairs creaked slightly as they ascended, necessitating careful foot placement to minimize noise. Dawson Ranch investors. Meeting is initiating, Olivia continued, providing real-time intelligence as the situation developed. 12 participants, including telegraph connections from Chicago, St. Louis, and Kansas City. The international composition of the call added another layer to the emerging picture. This wasn't just about local financial improprieties, but something with wider implications. When they reached the second-floor landing, Declan moved forward, with the fluid precision that had made Ghost Rider legendary in frontier circles. The space was utilitarian, exposed beams, wooden walls, and building infrastructure stretching in all directions, illuminated by sparse oil lamps. He navigated the environment with practiced ease, identifying optimal approach routes through the corridors. Sullivan maintained tactical spacing behind him, her own movements disciplined and controlled, while Dr. Winters followed with the careful precision of someone who understood the importance of maintaining operational integrity. Access point here, Declan indicated, identifying a maintenance hatch that would allow them to observe the executive floor without detection. He secured his weapon and descended to the hatch, manipulating the locking mechanism with specialized tools from his tactical kit. The hatch opened silently, revealing a narrow service corridor that ran above the executive suite ceiling. Surveillance only, he reminded them as they entered the confined space. No engagement unless civilian lives are directly threatened. They proceeded through the service corridor in tactical silence, guided by Olivia's ongoing updates through their secure communications. Investors' meeting is proceeding with standard quarterly financial review, she reported. Davenport is presenting performance metrics that appear significantly more positive than public disclosures would suggest. The discrepancy was telling. Either Davenport was deliberately misleading his investors, or the public financial statements had been manipulated to conceal the company's true position. Declan reached a ventilation access point that provided direct observation of the executive conference room below. Through the slats, he could see Davenport standing at the head of the table, gesturing toward projected financial charts, while the other executives maintained expressions of forced confidence. Maya Delgado sat slightly apart, her posture tense, as she took extensive notes on a secure ledger. Zephyr team is implementing some form of document intrusion, Olivia continued in their earpieces. Building lookouts show multiple unauthorized access attempts across the Dawson Ranch, secured document safes. They appear to be focusing on the financial ledgers and communications logs. Declan shifted position slightly to maintain optimal observation angles while remaining undetected. From his current vantage point, he could see both the conference room and, through an adjacent doorway, partial visibility of the document room where Karloff's team was operating. Petrov's fingers moved across specialized lockpicking equipment, with practiced efficiency, while Karlov maintained tactical oversight, his posture revealing the hyper-awareness of a seasoned operator even in this ostensibly non-combat situation. "They're not here for elimination," Declan murmured into his communications device, his assessment based on multiple tactical indicators. "This is a document operation." The observation was significant. It meant that immediate physical danger to the executives might be limited, but the implications of whatever Karlov's team was accessing could have far broader consequences. Sullivan had positioned herself at an adjacent observation point, maintaining visual coverage of the executive suite's main entrance. "Agreed," she confirmed, but the question remains, what specific documents are they targeting and for whom? Her law enforcement background framed the question in terms of motive and beneficiaries, crucial elements for understanding the full scope of the operation. "Investors are questioning Davenport's presentation," Olivia reported, monitoring the corporate meeting through surveillance systems. "Specifically, the St. Louis representative is requesting clarification on certain Kansas City transactions that don't align with reported territorial filings." The confrontation was escalating, the remote investors clearly less convinced by Davenport's performance than his immediate subordinates. Below them, Davenport's composure began to show signs of strain as he attempted to deflect the increasingly pointed questions. "As I've explained," he said, his voice carrying the artificial confidence of someone losing control of a narrative, "those transactions were structured through our special purpose companies to optimize tax efficiency while maintaining full regulatory compliance. That's not what territorial preliminary findings suggest," the St. Louis representative countered, his voice emerging crisp and authoritative through the telegraph operator. "Alexander Ellison's team has flagged multiple transactions through your Kansas City structure that appear designed specifically to circumvent regulations related to restricted trade with certain Indian territories." The mention of Indian territories triggered an immediate reaction from Karlov, visible through the document room doorway. His posture shifted, his attention now fully focused on the investors' meeting rather than the technical operation Petrov was conducting. Something significant had been revealed, a connection between Dawson Ranch's financial activities and interests that presumably aligned with Karlov's employers. "The compliance issues have been addressed," Maya interjected, her voice steady despite the evident tension. "As outlined in the document package I distributed last week, we've implemented enhanced due diligence protocols and terminated relationships with several intermediary entities identified in the preliminary review." This statement provoked visible alarm among the executives present in the room. Pierce leaned over to whisper urgently to Davenport, while Quinn's expression transformed from forced confidence to barely contained panic. Clearly, Maya's disclosure was not something they had anticipated or approved. She was providing information to the investors that contradicted their preferred narrative. "Zephyr team is accelerating their document extraction," Olivia reported, "through the secure channel. They've deployed some form of specialized copying technique across the Dawson Ranch ledgers. Records show mass document exfiltration targeting specific transactional records from the past 18 months. The timeline aligned precisely with the period that would be covered by Ellison's territorial investigation, suggesting Karlov's team was removing evidence that could prove damaging in the upcoming audit. Declan's focus intensified as he observed a subtle but significant change in Karlov's tactical posture. The Zephyr commander had shifted from passive surveillance to what operational specialists would recognize as pre-engagement positioning, subtle adjustments in stance, weight distribution, and hand placement that indicated preparation for imminent action. "Escalation imminent," Declan warned through the secure channel, his assessment based on micro-indicators that most observers would miss entirely. Below them, the situation in the conference room was deteriorating rapidly. "These explanations are insufficient," the Chicago investor declared, his aristocratic accent sharpened by evident irritation. "The discrepancies between these projections and the documentation submitted to regulators constitute potential securities. Fraud. I move that we suspend investment pending a full independent audit." Davenport's facade of control fractured completely at this suggestion. "That's absolutely unnecessary," he protested, abandoning any pretense of business decorum. "This is nothing more than a routine compliance review that's being blown out of proportion by overzealous regulators. Dawson Ranch has maintained impeccable standards throughout its operations." "Then you won't object to providing Mr. Ellison's team with unfettered access to all transaction records tomorrow," Meyer stated, the comment clearly designed to provoke reaction rather than seek agreement. "Including the Volkov fur trading partnerships and the Cherokee Territory infrastructure projects." The specific mention of these projects triggered immediate and dramatic responses throughout the room. Quinn actually stood from his chair in alarm, while Pierce's complexion drained of color. But most significantly, Karloff abandoned all pretense of covert operation, emerging from the document room with tactical intent clearly evident in his bearing. The third Zephyr operative appeared as well, moving to secure the conference room's main entrance. "Volkov fur trading was never discussed with the investors," the St. Louis representative said, his voice carrying evident shock even through the telegraph operator. "When was this partnership established? And why wasn't it included in the regulatory disclosures?" Before anyone could respond, Karloff entered the conference room fully, his presence immediately dominating the space with the unmistakable authority of a professional operator. "This meeting is concluded," he announced, his Russian accent more pronounced under stress. "A security vulnerability has been identified in your communications infrastructure. For your protection, all documents must be surrendered immediately." The pretense was transparent but effective, creating confusion while establishing control over potential evidence. Meyer, however, appeared unsurprised by this development, confirming Declan's earlier assessment that she was operating according to a different agenda than her colleagues. She calmly placed her ledger into her portfolio case rather than surrendering. "It as instructed. Tactical intervention required," Sullivan murmured through their secure channel, recognizing the situation had evolved beyond surveillance into potential threat to civilian safety. "Assessment?" The question was directed to Declan, acknowledging his superior experience with Karloff's operational methods and likely response patterns. Declan conducted a final tactical evaluation, calculating angles, response times, and civilian positioning, with the precision that had made him legendary. "Karloff is implementing evidence elimination, not personnel extraction," he concluded. "Primary target appears to be data rather than individuals, but that could change if they identify Meyer as cooperating with the territory." His assessment was delivered with clinical detachment, separating operational analysis from personal history. Despite his evident familiarity with the Zephyr commander, below them, Karloff had positioned his team to maintain control of the conference room while Petrov continued her technical operation in the adjacent document space. "All communications devices will remain here," Karloff instructed, indicating a container that his associate had placed on the conference table. "Building security has identified potential intruders. For your safety, we will escort you to secure transportation on the ground level." The evacuation pretense was clearly designed to remove the executives from the building before legitimate security or law enforcement could respond to whatever alarms Petrov's document intrusion had triggered. More concerning was the likelihood that once the executives had served their purpose in providing access and authentication, Karloff's team would have no further need for witnesses to their operation. "Intervention parameters," Declan said, finalizing. The operational approach. Sullivan secure the document room and contain Petrov. I'll neutralize Karloff and his tactical support. Dr. Winters establish medical triage position in the executive reception area. The assignments played to each team member's strengths while maximizing civilian protection. Non-lethal approaches. Preferred, but Karloff's team will not extend the same consideration. Exercise appropriate force response. As they prepared to emerge from their observation position, Olivia's voice came through their secure channel with new urgency. Additional complication, she reported. Building security system shows another team entering through the livery stable. 4 operators, tactical configuration, moving toward executive staircase access. The development introduced a significant variable, an unknown force whose objectives and allegiance remained undetermined. Federal response team, Sullivan suggested, considering the possibility that the territory had deployed tactical support in anticipation of Ellison's audit. Or additional Zephyr assets. Either possibility would dramatically alter the operational dynamics they were about to engage. Negative. On both, Olivia replied after a moment of verification. Facial recognition identifies the team leader as Gabriel Torres, private security contractor, former Union cavalry, currently operating under Sentinel Group umbrella. The identification added yet another layer to the increasingly complex situation. Sentinel Group was a legitimate private security organization that typically contracted with corporate and government clients for high-value protection details. Torres is Alexander Ellison's security chief, Declan stated, the connection immediately apparent to him, though surprising to the others. If he's here with a tactical team, Ellison is likely on site as well. This development transformed their understanding of the situation. The territorial investigation wasn't scheduled for tomorrow, but was already in progress, perhaps specifically timed to coincide with the investors' meeting to catch discrepancies. In real time, below them, the situation continued to deteriorate as Davenport finally recognized the deception. "You're not building security," he accused Karloff, belatedly recognizing the tactical professionalism that no corporate security team would display. "Who are you really working for?" His question revealed both his own complicity and his ignorance of the true forces aligned against him. He recognized the threat, but not its source or full implications. Karloff's response was coldly professional, as he drew a suppressed Remington from beneath his tailored jacket. "That is no longer your concern," he stated, all pretense abandoned. "Compliance is now your only relevant objective." The weapon wasn't aimed directly at anyone yet, but its presence transformed the encounter from deception to overt hostility. "Decision point," Sullivan whispered through their secure channel, recognizing that further delay would allow the situation to escalate beyond their capacity to control it effectively. Declan made the assessment in microseconds, calculating angles, civilian positions, and optimal intervention approaches. "Execute now," he commanded, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had once directed some of the most sensitive operations in modern frontier history. "Standard tactical entry. Civilians. Our priority." With that, he removed the ventilation access panel and prepared to re-enter a world he had abandoned 5 years earlier, not as the unassuming bartender with the steady hands, but as Ghost Rider, the most feared gunslinger in Western history. The storm raged against the building's wooden exterior. 3 legends prepared to converge in the Dawson Ranch executive suite. Karlov, the ruthless Zephyr commander, Torres, Ellison's dedicated security chief, and Declan Frost, the bartender whose quiet hands had never truly forgotten the weight of a precision weapon. The calm before the storm had ended. Now came the tempest itself. The descent into the executive conference room happened in perfect synchrony. Declan dropping silently from the ventilation access point, while Sullivan breached through the service corridor entrance at precisely the same moment. Their coordinated movement created the tactical advantage of split-focus response, forcing Karlov's team to divide their attention between multiple threats simultaneously. Declan landed with cat-like precision behind Karlov, while Sullivan emerged at an angle that gave her immediate line of sight to Petrov in the document room. "Territorial Marshal," Sullivan announced, her Colt raised in a textbook stance, weapons down, hands visible. The command carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed, but professionals like Karlov rarely responded to standard protocols. True to form, the Zephyr commander reacted with practiced efficiency, pivoting to face the new threat while simultaneously using the conference table as partial cover. His weapon came up smoothly, but before he could acquire target lock, Declan's voice cut through the chaos, not loud, but carrying a distinctive cadence that penetrated Karlov's combat focus. "Hello, Anton." Those two words, delivered in the same soft voice Declan had used as a bartender, but now carrying entirely different weight, caused Karlov to freeze momentarily. His eyes widened in genuine shock as recognition dawned. "Ghost Rider," he breathed, the codename emerging with a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect. "You're supposed to be dead." "Greatly exaggerated," Declan replied, his Winchester trained unwaveringly on Karlov's center mass despite the chaotic environment. "Lower your weapon. This operation is compromised." The directive was delivered not as a threat, but as a professional courtesy, one operator to another. His reaction confirmed the accuracy of her statement, while revealing his own complicity in whatever illicit operations were being uncovered. 8 months, Maya replied, her composure unwavering despite the tension surrounding her. 8 months of documenting every transaction, every shell company, every special handling instruction for the Cherokee accounts. She glanced toward Declan with new understanding, recognizing his role beyond that of a simple bartender. Tomorrow's audit isn't just financial. It's a joint territorial intelligence operation targeting the entire network. This information transformed the tactical dynamics completely. If Maya was a federal asset embedded within Dawson Ranch, protecting her became a priority mission objective beyond the general civilian safeguarding. Moreover, the revelation that tomorrow's audit was actually a major intelligence operation explained the convergence of multiple high-level assets at this location. Karlov's team, Torres's security detail, and now the re-emergence of Ghost Rider himself, which makes this document extraction even more critical, Karlov concluded, connecting the pieces with professional acuity. Your territorial office has only partial intelligence. We've been tracking the network from the eastern end for over 2 years. The implication was clear. Zephyr was operating with objectives that might parallel rather than oppose American interests, at least in this specific operation. Olivia's voice came through their secure channel again, this time with unmistakable urgency. New development. Building security reports show armed response team entering through the roof access. Tactical configuration. Military-grade equipment. No identifying markers. The information added yet another variable to the already complex situation, an unknown force whose objectives and allegiance remained unclear. "Yours?" Declan asked Karlov, who responded with a slight headshake that confirmed these new arrivals weren't Zephyr reinforcements. The silent exchange between adversaries conveyed volumes. Despite their opposition, there was professional respect and a tacit acknowledgement that this new development potentially threatened all parties equally. Davenport's insurance policy, Maya suggested, glancing toward the Dawson Ranch CEO with evident disgust. He maintains a private security force through a shell company in Colorado. former Confederate soldiers and mercenary contractors. Her intelligence was specific and detailed, further confirming her role as an embedded federal asset. Davenport's expression shifted from rage to smug confidence, suggesting Maya's assessment was accurate. "You people are so predictable," he sneered, his composure returning as he processed this apparent advantage, "always following rules and protocols, while the real power operates beyond your jurisdiction." He straightened his custom leather vest with affected nonchalance. "Did you really think we wouldn't have contingencies for federal interference?" The situation had evolved beyond a simple standoff into something far more complex. Multiple armed groups with competing objectives converging on a single location, with civilian lives hanging in the balance. Declan processed these variables with the calculating precision that had made him legendary, reassessing tactical options and prioritizing objectives based on the emerging intelligence. "Olivia," he communicated through their secure channel, "notify Torres that we have federal assets on site requiring immediate extraction. Priority protection for Maya Delgado." The instruction acknowledged the reality that protecting the territory's embedded agent had become the primary mission objective, superseding the original surveillance operation. "Sullivan," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper yet carrying clear authority, "coordinate with Torres for civilian evacuation. Dr. Winters, prepare for potential casualties." The updated assignments reflected the tactical realities of their situation, with multiple armed groups converging. Maintaining zero civilian casualties would require extraordinary coordination. "And what about us, Ghost Rider?" Karloff inquired, still maintaining his weapon position, but with mounting awareness of their deteriorating tactical situation. "Where do we factor in your revised operational parameters?" Before Declan could respond, the building was rocked by a sudden explosion from below, not devastating enough to compromise structural integrity, but clearly designed to disable critical access. The oil lamps flickered momentarily before emergency lanterns engaged, bathing the executive suite in the harsh glow of backup illumination. "Dynamite detonation on floor 1. Olivia reported through their secure channel, her voice maintaining professional calm despite the escalation. "Primary stairwell affected. Building security systems compromised. Backup routes engaging but building infrastructure is damaged." The timing and target confirmed this wasn't a random attack, but a coordinated assault designed to cripple both Dawson Ranch's systems and building security simultaneously. More significantly, it suggested that Davenport's insurance policy team was operating with objectives beyond simple protection. They were implementing a scorched earth protocol to eliminate evidence that might survive extraction attempts. Through the conference room windows, they could see multiple riders approaching. Through the storm, unmarked black horses moving with military precision despite the hazardous weather conditions. Their presence confirmed the scale of the operation underway. This wasn't merely a corporate security response, but something far more extensive and professionally implemented. "This isn't about protecting you," Declan told Davenport, reassessing the executive with cold clarity. "It's about eliminating you." The realization was based on multiple tactical indicators: the dynamite targeting critical systems, the rider approach pattern suggesting extraction of items rather than personnel, and the comprehensive nature of the assault suggesting permanent rather than temporary solutions. For the first time, genuine fear replaced Davenport's arrogance, as the implication of Declan's assessment penetrated his understanding. "That's absurd," he protested, though uncertainty had crept into his voice. "These are my security contractors. I pay them thousands to protect the operation, not the operators." Karloff interrupted, his professional assessment aligning with Declan's. "When exposure becomes inevitable, Contingency protocols prioritize operational security over personnel retention. The clinical description masked a brutal reality. Davenport and his executives had become liabilities to whatever organization truly controlled the illicit financial network, and liabilities were routinely eliminated in such operations. The realization created an unexpected alignment of interests among former adversaries, Declan's team prioritizing civilian protection and intelligence gathering, Karloff's team focused on document extraction related to the broader network, and both now recognizing that Davenport's security contractors represented a lethal threat to everyone in the executive suite. Tactical cooperation, Declan proposed to Karloff, the offer extended professionally rather than emotionally. Combined assets against the incoming team, civilian protection as shared priority. The proposal acknowledged operational realities without requiring either side to abandon their respective missions entirely. Karloff considered for precisely 3 seconds, the exact calculation period a Zephyr commander was trained to allow for. Tactical reassessment in fluid situations, before giving a sharp nod of agreement. Temporary operational alignment, he confirmed, already shifting his position to establish better coverage of the primary entrance. Petrov continues document extraction during cooperative engagement. Sullivan exchanged a brief glance with Declan, confirming her understanding of this tactical adjustment. Standard protocols discouraged cooperation with potential hostiles, but operational realities sometimes necessitated pragmatic adaptation, especially when civilian lives hung in the balance. Her slight nod conveyed acceptance of the modified approach. "Olivia," Declan communicated through their secure channel. "Coordinate with Torres' team for pincer response. Inform them we have established temporary cooperative parameters with Zephyr assets against incoming hostiles." The instruction acknowledged the complexity of having 3 separate tactical teams operating in the same environment while attempting to establish parameters that would prevent blue-on-blue engagement. Through the rain-spattered windows, they could see the riders maintaining holding patterns despite the intensifying storm, a testament to the riders' exceptional skill and the operation's critical priority. Lightning illuminated the mounted weapons in stark relief every few seconds, revealing military-grade repeating rifles that classified them as professional killers despite their unmarked exteriors. As executive floor security doors began to engage, emergency lockdown procedures triggered by the dynamite detonation, Declan completed his tactical assessment and reached an operational decision. The quiet bartender with the steady hands had fully transformed into Ghost Rider, the legendary gunslinger whose operational parameters were now expanded beyond his original intent when entering the executive suite. What had begun as a surveillance operation had evolved into something far more complex, a multi-faction engagement where temporary alliances formed out of necessity rather than ideology. As Declan positioned himself for optimal coverage of both the main entrance and the windows, his expression revealed nothing of his internal calculations. Only the absolute focus of a professional about to engage in precisely the type of high-stakes operation he had abandoned 5 years earlier. "Incoming," Olivia warned through their secure channel as the executive floor security doors were breached with tactical precision. The confrontation that would determine the fate of everyone in the Dawson Ranch executive suite was about to begin in earnest, with Ghost Rider once again at the center of a lethal convergence that would test even his legendary skills. The breach. Team entered with military precision, 6 operators in full tactical gear, moving in synchronized formation through the compromised security doors. Their equipment was top-tier but deliberately unmarked, and their movements displayed the fluid coordination that came only from extensive field operations together. Unlike standard corporate security, these weren't hired mercenaries, but a cohesive unit with shared operational experience. Declan recognized their entry pattern immediately, the distinctive split-flow tactical approach developed by Frontier Scouts for enclosed space clearing with minimal collateral damage. Each operator moved to predetermined positions that created overlapping fields of fire while maintaining maximum coverage with minimum exposure. Their objective was unmistakable: secure the room, eliminate targets, extract critical assets. "Down!" Declan commanded, his voice carrying just enough volume to cut through the executive's panicked confusion. Sullivan was already moving, pulling Maya and the nearest civilian toward cover behind the reinforced cabinet along the wall. Karloff and his team had likewise recognized the tactical threat, positioning themselves to create a crossfire pattern against the incoming operators. The lead breacher registered the defensive positioning and made an immediate tactical reassessment, raising a closed fist that halted his team's advance just inside the entrance. For a brief moment, the entire room hung in suspended animation, multiple armed professionals maintaining target acquisition without initiating fire, each calculating the catastrophic consequences of being the first to break the fragile standoff. "Colonel Frost," the breach team leader addressed Declan, using a rank and name that hadn't been publicly associated with him in 5 years. "Unexpected, but not unwelcome." The voice carried a distinctive accent, Eastern European overlaid with American frontier cadences, creating a linguistic hybrid that few would recognize, but Declan knew it immediately. "Volkov," he acknowledged, neither lowering his weapon nor showing surprise at encountering a ghost from his past. "The Cossacks. Retirement package must be disappointing if you're running corporate extraction teams." The reference to Russia's frontier warriors carried layers of meaning between them, a shared history that extended far beyond this room. The breach team leader removed his tactical hat, revealing a man in his 50s with steel-grey hair cropped in military precision and eyes that held the cold calculation of someone who had ordered deaths as routinely as others ordered coffee. "Nikolai Volkov died in Crimea," he replied with the hint of a smile that never reached his eyes. "I am merely a security consultant, ensuring corporate interests remain protected against unwarranted government interference." "By eliminating witnesses and evidence," Sullivan observed, maintaining her tactical position while assessing this unexpected development. Her law enforcement training recognized the team for what it was: a cleanup crew tasked with ensuring nothing remained that could compromise the larger operation. "Efficiency requires difficult decisions," Volkov replied with casual indifference, something the colonel understands quite intimately. His gaze returned to Declan, carrying unspoken communications between former adversaries. "Your presence complicates matters but doesn't fundamentally alter operational objectives." Karloff had maintained professional silence during this exchange, but his tactical positioning had subtly adjusted to account for the new intelligence. That the breach team leader and Declan shared operational history that might influence the unfolding scenario. "Zephyr has no quarrel with your team, Volkov," he stated, recognizing the Russian operative despite his supposed death. "Our interests are purely informational." Volkov's cold smile widened fractionally. "Anton Karloff, still Denver's most reliable problem solver." The recognition confirmed the interconnected nature of this confrontation. Not random opponents, but professionals whose paths had crossed in the shadowed corners of frontier operations. "Unfortunately, your document extraction conflicts with our sanitization protocols. No records can remain." The veiled exchange revealed crucial intelligence to everyone in the room. Volkov's team wasn't simply there to eliminate witnesses, but to ensure complete destruction of all evidence related to whatever operation Dawson Ranch had been facilitating. This explained the dynamite detonation and suggested more comprehensive destruction would follow, Maya seized this moment of distraction to access her secure ledger, fingers moving across the pages with practiced efficiency. "Too late," she announced, her composure remarkable under the circumstances. "Authenticated Treasury access already initiated. All relevant documents copied to secured federal offices as of 4 minutes ago." Her statement was delivered with the confidence of someone holding a crucial card in a high-stakes game. Davenport's expression contorted with rage and disbelief. "You've destroyed everything," he shouted, abandoning caution as he lunged toward her. "Do you have any idea what they'll—" His movement and outburst created the spark that ignited the volatile tactical environment. Everything happened simultaneously, Volkov's team advancing with weapons raised, Karloff firing a precision round that dropped the nearest breach team operator, Sullivan pulling Maya behind cover as bullets began to fly, and Declan executing a fluid movement that simultaneously neutralized Davenport's charge and positioned him to engage multiple targets. The conference room erupted into calculated chaos, not the random violence of panicked combatants, but the coordinated precision of professionals executing combat protocols under extreme conditions. Declan moved through the space like liquid mercury, his actions combining defensive maneuvers to protect civilians with offensive precision that systematically reduced the tactical advantage of Volkov's superior numbers. Torres' team breaching. "Southwest corridor," Olivia reported through their secure channel, her voice maintaining remarkable calm despite monitoring the firefight through building lookouts. 40 seconds to your position." The information was crucial. Reinforcements were imminent, potentially shifting the tactical balance if they could maintain position until arrival. Sullivan had created a defensive perimeter around the civilian. Executives, her law enforcement training, adapted to the tactical realities of their situation. "Stay down!" she commanded as she returned focused fire on Volkov's operators. Heads covered, bodies compact. Her instructions reflected standard civilian protection protocols while she maintained disciplined ammunition conservation. Each shot delivered with purpose rather than panic. Across the room, Karlov and his remaining team member had established a separate fire point, creating a triangulation effect that forced Volkov's team to divide their attention across multiple threat vectors. Despite being adversaries minutes earlier, the Zephyr operators and Declan's team had seamlessly integrated their tactical approaches against the common threat. Professionals adapting to fluid battlefield conditions without requiring explicit coordination. Through the windows, the riders had begun more aggressive positioning, their mounted weapons systems now clearly visible through the storm's fury. Lightning illuminated their approach vectors as they prepared for what appeared to be a building assault rather than simple extraction. "They're going to breach through the windows," Declan assessed, recognizing the distinctive positioning pattern. Preparing for full sanitization. The term carried specific meaning in operational contexts, complete elimination of all evidence and witnesses, typically followed by structural compromise to disguise the intentional nature of the destruction, as if confirming his assessment, the building's fire alarm suddenly rang, unleashing a flurry of activity throughout the floor that Declan immediately recognized wasn't standard evacuation, but a specialized incendiary preparation designed to appear as normal response while actually preparing surfaces for accelerated combustion. "Oil accelerant deployed," he warned through their secure channel, preparing for controlled fire through apparent structural accident. The tactic was sophisticated. Create what would appear to be a tragic office fire resulting from the dynamite disruption, while actually implementing targeted destruction of evidence and witnesses. Volkov had used the firefight as tactical cover to reach a position near the document room, where he was now implementing what appeared to be a specialized device designed to complete the data destruction that the dynamite had initiated. "Your dedication is admirable," he called to Declan over the chaos, but ultimately futile. Some operations exceed even your clearance level, Colonel. The statement carried implications beyond the immediate tactical situation, suggesting that whatever Dawson Ranch had been facilitating potentially involved elements within American intelligence or government structures, creating compartmentalized operations designed to maintain deniability even from legitimate oversight. "Torres, status!" Sullivan demanded through their secure channel, recognizing their tactical position was deteriorating rapidly between the advancing firefight and the environmental hazard of the oil accelerant. "Engaging hostiles in the southwest corridor," came the terse reply. "Heavy resistance. Delayed arrival estimated 2 minutes." The update confirmed what Declan had already calculated. Torres's team was encountering prepared opposition, likely additional operators from Volkov's extended unit deployed specifically to delay reinforcements. The tactical situation was approaching. Critical thresholds, ammunition running low, oil accelerant concentrations increasing, and riders maneuvering for direct building breach. Declan conducted a rapid assessment, calculating variables and potential outcomes with the precision that had made Ghost Rider legendary in operational circles. "Karloff," he called to the Zephyr commander, who had maintained disciplined fire. Despite sustaining a grazing wound to his shoulder, document extraction status. The query reflected their temporary operational alignment. Despite being adversaries, they shared the immediate objective of preventing Volkov's complete sanitization protocol. 87%, Karloff replied, his professional discipline evident in his precise response despite the chaos surrounding them. Critical segments secured, but transmission blocked by telegraph disruption. The information confirmed what Declan had suspected. Volkov's team had implemented communications countermeasures as part of their containment strategy. "Olivia," Declan instructed through their secure channel, "activate Protocol 11. The command initiated a specialized communications override designed for exactly this scenario, bypassing standard transmission channels to create a secured burst transmission through alternative infrastructure. Protocol 11 engaged. Olivia, confirmed. Courier relay active. Transmission pathway established through alternate architecture." The technical implementation created a brief window during which Karloff's extracted documents could potentially bypass Volkov's disruption measures. Understanding the opportunity, Karloff immediately signaled Petrov, who connected her specialized equipment to the access port Olivia had remotely activated. "Transmitting now," she confirmed, her focus absolute despite bullets impacting near her position. 30 seconds to completion. The 30-second window created a critical vulnerability. To complete the transmission, they needed to maintain their tactical position despite deteriorating conditions. Volkov recognized this immediately, redirecting his team's focus toward Petrov's position in an attempt to disrupt the transmission before completion. "Cover the transmission," Declan ordered, initiating a coordinated defensive action that combined his precision fire with Sullivan's tactical positioning to create a protective envelope around Petrov during the critical transfer period. The temporary alliance between former adversaries had transformed into actively coordinated operations, professionals recognizing that their competing objectives shared a common prerequisite of preventing Volkov's complete sanitization. Through the windows, one of the riders had maneuvered into breach position, his rifle aimed at the reinforced glass. The imminent assault would introduce yet another variable into the already complex tactical environment. "Transmission complete," Petrov announced, the professional satisfaction in her voice evident despite their dire circumstances. "Documents secured and authenticated." The confirmation represented a significant achievement. Despite Volkov's extensive preparations, critical intelligence had escaped his containment measures. His expression revealed recognition of this tactical failure, but not defeat. Impressive adaptation, he acknowledged, his cold professionalism unchanged despite the setback, but ultimately irrelevant to primary objectives. He activated a device on his tactical vest, triggering a sequence that caused several barrels to be visible throughout the executive floor. The pattern was unmistakable to anyone with demolitions training. Synchronized charges placed at structural weak points, designed to ensure complete destruction. 2-minute countdown initiated. He announced with clinical detachment, final containment protocol engaged, a regrettable but necessary precaution. The statement confirmed what Declan had already assessed. Volkov's cleanup operation included complete structural demolition disguised as catastrophic system failure following the dynamite attack. The revelation transformed their tactical priorities entirely, from defensive positioning to immediate evacuation. Sullivan, begin civilian extraction, Declan ordered, already calculating evacuation routes against known charge positions. Service corridor to emergency stairwell. Dr. Winters will meet you at junction point for medical support. As Sullivan began organizing the terrified executives for rapid evacuation, Declan maintained suppressive fire to cover their movement. Maya assisted with remarkable composure, her intelligence training evident in how she guided the civilians despite the chaos surrounding them. I assume our temporary cooperation extends to evacuation parameters, Karloff inquired, his pragmatic approach unchanged despite their dire circumstances. The question wasn't emotional, but purely operational, whether their tactical alignment would continue during withdrawal. Confirmed, Declan replied with equal pragmatism. Combined extraction through Northeast Service Corridor. Torres will secure the evacuation route from Level 1. The coordinated approach maximized their chances of successful civilian extraction. Despite the rapidly deteriorating conditions, as the executives were led toward the service exit under Sullivan's protection, Declan maintained tactical position to cover their retreat. Volkov's team had shifted to predetermined extraction points, suggesting they had dedicated evacuation protocols separate from the riders, likely specialized climbing equipment to depart before detonation. The confrontation had evolved beyond the initial standoff into something far more complex, a multi-faction tactical scenario where temporary alliances formed and dissolved based on evolving priorities and shared objectives. What had begun as a simple case of arrogant ranchers harassing a bartender had revealed layers of international intelligence operations, financial crimes, funding weapons proliferation, and now a coordinated sanitization protocol designed to eliminate all evidence through controlled demolition. In the midst of this chaos, Declan maintained the absolute focus that had made him legendary. Each movement precise, each decision calculated, each action purposeful despite the deteriorating environment. The quiet bartender with the steady hands had fully re-emerged as Ghost Rider, implementing evacuation protocols with the same meticulous precision he had once applied to serving perfect whiskies. As the final civilians cleared the conference room under Sullivan's guidance, Declan prepared to initiate his own tactical withdrawal. But Volkov's voice cut through the chaos once more, carrying a message meant for him alone. "She's alive, Colonel." Those 3 words froze Declan more effectively than any weapon could have, creating a momentary break in his absolute focus. Volkov recognized the impact of his statement, his cold smile returning as he confirmed he had achieved his intended effect. "Santa Fe," he continued, providing just enough detail to verify the authenticity of his claim. "Living under the name Anna Weiss. Quite the convincing death you arranged for her. Fooled almost everyone." The information was delivered with clinical precision, designed to create maximum psychological impact at this critical tactical moment. Disinformation to create hesitation, Declan assessed, his professional discipline reasserting itself despite the emotional impact of Volkov's claim. Standard psychological warfare tactics, but something in his expression betrayed uncertainty. The faintest flicker of doubt that even his legendary control couldn't entirely suppress. "Believe what you wish," Volkov replied as he activated his extraction equipment. "But ask yourself, why would I offer valuable intelligence in a tactical situation where verification is impossible?" His question was cunningly crafted to plant seeds of doubt rather than provide actionable information, the perfect psychological weapon against an opponent renowned for his precision and focus. As the demolition countdown continued and both teams initiated their respective extraction protocols, Declan faced a moment of genuine uncertainty for the first time since the confrontation began. The quiet bartender, who had spent 5 years polishing glasses with methodical precision, now confronted a question that threatened the foundational narrative of his carefully constructed second life. The revelations of this night had extended far beyond tactical engagements or operational objectives, reaching into the very personal history that had driven Ghost Rider to become an unassuming bartender with unnaturally steady hands 5 years earlier. Whatever the outcome of their immediate evacuation, nothing would return to how it had been before arrogant ranchers had decided to mock the wrong bartender. The evacuation proceeded with controlled urgency through the Northeast Service Corridor. Sullivan, leading the civilian group with Maya's assistance, while Declan and Karlov's team maintained rear security against pursuit. The demolition countdown had reached the critical 90-second threshold, each passing moment compressing their available extraction window. "Torres' team has secured Level 1, Olivia reported through their secure channel, establishing defensive perimeter at the emergency stairwell access point. The update provided crucial operational intelligence. They had a secured extraction route if they could reach it before detonation. Declan maintained absolute tactical focus despite Volkov's psychological warfare attempt. His movements remained precise, his decision-making uncompromised, but beneath this professional facade, something had fundamentally shifted. The possibility, however remote, that Amara might be alive had created a hairline fracture in the foundation of his carefully constructed second life. Extraction riders deploying from stable yard. Olivia continued her tactical updates. 3 mounted men, military configuration, no identification markings. Building lookouts show Volkov's team moving toward the northeast exit. The intelligence confirmed what Declan had already calculated. Volkov had pre-positioned extraction assets separate from the assault riders, creating redundant evacuation options typical of well-planned sanitization operations. As they reached the junction point, where the service corridor intersected with the emergency stairwell access, Dr. Winters was waiting as planned, her medical kit prepared for immediate triage. "Status?" she inquired, her clinical assessment already categorizing injuries among the evacuating group. "Multiple civilians with minor injuries," Sullivan reported professionally. "Maya Delgado has sustained a graze wound to the left shoulder but remains ambulatory. No critical casualties among our group." The assessment reflected their remarkably successful civilian protection despite the chaotic firefight they had navigated. "Karlov has a through and through to the right shoulder," Declan added, acknowledging the Zephyr commander's stoic endurance of his injury during the extraction. "Petrov appears uninjured. 3rd Zephyr operative sustained fatal injuries covering our withdrawal." The clinical accounting of their tactical situation continued despite the emotional undercurrents generated by Volkov's revelation. 60 seconds to detonation, Olivia warned through their secure channel. Structural analysis suggests controlled demolition designed to compromise floors 1 through 3 while maintaining overall building integrity. The assessment aligned with Volkov's operational methodology creates sufficient destruction to eliminate evidence while avoiding catastrophic structural failure that would trigger international incident investigation. As the civilian evacuation continued down the emergency stairwell under Sullivan and Torres's protection, Declan paused briefly. At the junction point, his tactical awareness registering something the others had missed, a faint displacement of air pressure indicating movement through the ventilation system parallel to their position. "Secondary team in the utility conduits," he warned Karloff, who immediately adjusted his position to cover the service access panel where the infiltration would likely emerge. Their continued tactical cooperation reflected professional pragmatism rather than trust, temporary alignment of objectives rather than actual alliance. The access panel exploded outward with controlled force, discharging specialized flash suppression. Smoke designed to disrupt both standard and thermal vision. Through this tactical obscuration emerged 2 operators in advanced infiltration gear, elements of Volkov's extended team positioned to intercept evacuees through secondary routes. Declan and Karloff responded with coordinated precision, despite never having operated together previously. Their movements complemented each other with the synchronization that came only from equivalent levels of professional training. Karloff engaging the first operator with disciplined fire, while Declan executed a fluid close-quarters neutralization. Of the second before they could target the civilians further down the stairwell, "Clear," Declan confirmed, after verifying both threats had been neutralized. The momentary engagement had delayed their own extraction, compression there already, limited withdrawal window before detonation. 40 seconds to minimum safe distance, he calculated, understanding the tactical reality that they might not clear the blast radius before Volkov's charges activated. "Go," Karloff directed Petrov, prioritizing his team members' extraction. "Complete transmission confirmation at the designated fallback point." The instruction carried operational significance beyond simple evacuation. Ensuring their extracted documents reach their intended recipients remained their primary mission objective, despite tactical complications. As Petrov disappeared down the emergency stairwell, Karloff turned to Declan with professional acknowledgement. "This temporary alignment has been instructive, Ghost Rider," he stated with the detached assessment of one professional evaluating another. "Your reputation remains well earned despite your sabbatical." "Volkov's claim about Santa Fe," Declan responded, addressing directly what had remained unspoken. "Between them, your assessment?" The question wasn't emotional but operational, seeking professional evaluation from someone with relevant intelligence access rather than personal reassurance. Karloff considered momentarily before responding with calculated precision. Amara Kessler's death was verified through multiple intelligence channels, he confirmed, demonstrating knowledge of information that few possessed. However, verification relied primarily on forensic evidence provided by your own team at the Santa Fe safe house. The assessment contained critical intelligence embedded within seemingly straightforward information. Karloff was confirming that while Amara's death had been accepted as fact throughout intelligence communities, the verification chain contained a potential vulnerability if Declan's own team had participated in fabricating the evidence. The possibility created a moment of genuine uncertainty for someone whose operational methodology relied on absolute precision and verified intelligence. 30 seconds to detonation, Olivia warned through their secure channel. Immediate extraction required. The urgency cut through their professional exchange, refocusing attention on the immediate tactical necessity of evacuation. "This conversation remains incomplete," Karloff acknowledged, as they began their final extraction movement toward the emergency stairwell. Should operational parameters permit future engagement under non-adversarial conditions, there may be additional intelligence worth exchanging. The offer wasn't friendship, but professional courtesy, recognition that their temporary tactical alignment had created potential value beyond their immediate objectives. As they descended the emergency stairwell, the building's structure began to transmit early vibrations of the imminent detonation. Volkov's demolition charges had been placed with expert precision at structural stress points, designed to create catastrophic but contained destruction throughout the executive floors. Torres' team has secured ground floor evacuation point. Olivia updated through their secure channel. All civilians successfully extracted to secure transportation. Sullivan and Maya Delgado are proceeding to Treasury Rendezvous Point with extracted documents. The confirmation provided crucial operational clarity. Their primary mission objectives regarding civilian protection and intelligence preservation had been successfully achieved despite tactical complications. The first detonation wave activated. As they reached the first floor, the concussive force rippling through the building's wooden framework like thunder through a canyon. Emergency lighting flickered momentarily as backup systems engaged, bathing the stairwell in pulsing lantern illumination that created a disorienting strobe effect. Secondary detonation sequence initiating, Olivia warned, her voice maintaining remarkable calm despite monitoring the progressive structural failure of the building's upper floors. Evacuation route through the rear entrance remains viable for approximately 20 seconds before structural integrity is compromised. Declan and Karloff increased their descent pace, navigating through the increasingly unstable stairwell with the practiced efficiency of professionals accustomed to operating in deteriorating environments. The building's groaning wooden skeleton provided an ominous soundtrack to their extraction, sawdust beginning to filter through ventilation systems as the controlled demolition progressed. As they reached the ground floor, Torres was waiting at the secured evacuation point, his tactical team maintaining perimeter security around the service entrance that had been overridden to provide express evacuation to waiting horses. "Ghost Rider," he acknowledged Declan with professional recognition. "Didn't expect to find you back in the field." "Temporary operational necessity," Declan replied, his focus remaining on completing the extraction rather than explaining his circumstances. "Structural integrity assessment?" The question prioritized tactical intelligence over personal explanations, reflecting his continued operational mindset despite the extraordinary circumstances that had drawn him back into active engagement. Building management observers indicate progressive collapse isolated to the office floors, Torres reported with military precision. Primary structural components remain within tolerance parameters. Controlled demolition rather than catastrophic failure. His assessment confirmed their earlier analysis. Volkov's team had implemented a sophisticated sanitization protocol designed to eliminate evidence while minimizing broader investigation triggers. "Karloff requires medical extraction," Declan indicated, acknowledging the Zephyr commander's worsening condition despite his professional stoicism. "Gunshot wound, through and through, moderate blood loss, but no arterial damage." The clinical assessment reflected both tactical priority and professional courtesy, ensuring proper medical treatment for someone who had temporarily aligned with their objectives, despite being a potential adversary. Torres evaluated Karloff with professional detachment, clearly recognizing a foreign operative but prioritizing immediate tactical necessities over jurisdictional complications. "Medical team standing by at ground-level extraction point," he confirmed, directing two of his tactical team to assist the wounded Zephyr commander. Treasury operational parameters authorize temporary medical support pending formal disposition. Determination. The bureaucratic terminology masked a complex reality. Karloff's Zephyr team occupied an unusual position in the current situation, having both opposed and assisted federal objectives at different points throughout the engagement. His disposition would ultimately be determined through high-level intelligence channels rather than standard law enforcement protocols. As they moved toward the waiting horses for final extraction, Declan maintained tactical awareness despite the apparent conclusion of immediate threats. Professional discipline never assumed an operation was complete until all personnel had reached secured positions and after-action protocols were implemented. Structural collapse continuing with controlled progression, Olivia updated through their secure channel. Building evacuation proceeding according to emergency protocols. First responders have been advised of a potential system malfunction following unauthorized access to restricted areas. The information confirmed their extraction window remained viable while establishing the public narrative that would explain the partial building collapse without revealing the actual circumstances. When they reached the stables, they emerged into controlled chaos, building security, implementing evacuation procedures for remaining occupants, while emergency medical teams established triage positions near the main entrance. Dr. Winters had integrated seamlessly with the medical response, providing continuity of care for civilians from their group while maintaining operational security regarding the actual circumstances. Sheriff Sullivan has secured Maya Delgado at the Treasury extraction point, Olivia reported, completing the operational picture. All extracted documents confirmed received at secure federal offices. Mission objectives achieved despite tactical complications. The clinical assessment reflected the extraordinary success they had managed, despite multiple adversarial forces and complex operational parameters. As Karloff was transferred to medical care under Torres's supervision, he exchanged a final glance with Declan, a professional acknowledgement between operational equals who had temporarily aligned despite fundamentally different allegiances. No words were necessary. The look communicated both respect and awareness that their next encounter might once again place them on opposing sides, depending on operational assignments. Amid the controlled evacuation procedures, Alexander Ellison finally made his appearance, a PG, distinguished man in his 50s, wearing a custom suit that couldn't quite disguise his military bearing. His approach to Declan was direct but measured, recognition evident in his expression despite the years that had passed since their last encounter. "Colonel Frost," he acknowledged, using the formal address despite Declan's apparent civilian status. "Your unexpected intervention proved remarkably fortuitous for our operation." The statement contained layers of meaning. Recognition of Declan's contribution while acknowledging the unplanned nature of his involvement. "Circumstances necessitated adaptation," Declan replied simply, his focus still partially engaged with monitoring the ongoing evacuation and building collapse rather than conversation. Maya Delgado's extraction was prioritized once her status became apparent. The response reflected continued operational focus rather than seeking acknowledgement or explanation. Ellison studied him with the calculating assessment of someone accustomed to evaluating both tactical outcomes and personnel capabilities simultaneously. 5 years tending bar, he observed, neither questioning nor judgmental, but simply stating a fact that few would have known. An unusual application of your particular skill set. The comment penetrated Declan's professional detachment, creating a momentary window into the personal choices that had led Ghost Rider to become an unassuming bartender with unnaturally steady hands. "Some skills transfer surprisingly well," he replied. a hint of the quiet bartender emerging briefly through the operational persona. Observation, precision, patience. "And yet here you are," Ellison noted, gesturing to encompass the tactical aftermath surrounding them. "Back in the field, despite your rather definitive resignation." His observation wasn't accusatory, but carried genuine curiosity about what had drawn Declan back into operational engagement after such a complete withdrawal. Before Declan could respond, Torres approached, with new urgency, his expression conveying tactical information before he spoke. "Sir, Frontier lookouts have identified multiple unauthorized riders departing restricted territory northeast of our position. Patton believes one group matches Volkov's operational signature." The intelligence shifted Ellison's focus immediately from personal curiosity to operational necessity. "Implement tracking protocols," he directed with the natural authority of someone accustomed to command. "Coordinate with territorial scouts for trail intelligence on potential movement between the riders and known outposts." The instructions reflected standard operational procedure for high-value target tracking following disengagement. As Torres moved to implement these directives, Ellison returned his attention to Declan with newfound intensity. "Volkov was confirmed eliminated in Crimea 3 years ago," he stated, the information clearly significant beyond mere tactical intelligence. His reappearance in this operation suggests broader implications requiring immediate assessment. But Declan's focus had shifted beyond their immediate tactical situation to something Volkov had said during their confrontation, something that continued to resonate beyond the concluded operation. "Santa Fe," he responded, the single word, carrying profound significance between them. "Anna Weiss." Ellison's expression transformed with genuine surprise, a rarity for someone with his operational experience and control. "What do you know about that name?" he asked, his voice lowering despite the chaotic environment surrounding them. The question confirmed what Declan had suspected. Volkov's seemingly tactical disinformation might contain elements of actual intelligence. "Apparently not enough," Declan replied, his outwardly calm demeanor masking the seismic implications of this exchange. "But perhaps it's time for a more comprehensive briefing." The statement wasn't a request, but a professional assessment, recognition that operational parameters had fundamentally changed based on new intelligence. As emergency responders continued to arrive, and the controlled demolition of the executive floors progressed above them, something had fundamentally shifted in Declan's carefully constructed second life. The quiet bartender with the unnaturally steady hands had not only re-engaged with his former operational identity, but now confronted the possibility that the foundational event that had driven his withdrawal from that life might have been built on incomplete or manipulated intelligence. What had begun as arrogant ranchers challenging an unassuming bartender had cascaded into revelations that threatened to unravel 5 years of carefully maintained anonymity and the personal narrative that had sustained it. Whatever came next would require all the precision, focus, and adaptability that had made Ghost Rider legendary, but directed toward a deeply personal mission that transcended traditional operational parameters. Dawn broke over the prairie, painting the aftermath in harsh clarity. Emergency wagons surrounded the mercantile building, their horses stamping impatiently against the wooden facade that now featured a gaping wound where the executive offices had been. The official story had already taken shape across town, a catastrophic fire following an attempted robbery, resulting in localized structural damage, but miraculously no fatalities. The narrative was clean, contained, and entirely fictional. 6 hours after the evacuation, Declan sat motionless in a secure territorial office facility 20 miles outside the town. The room was deliberately nondescript. government-issue furniture, no windows, sound-dampening technology embedded in the walls. A debriefing room designed for high-sensitivity operations, where even the air seemed classified. Across from him sat Ellison, now in his element as a senior territorial intelligence coordinator rather than a field operative. Between them lay a sealed document folder, unmarked except for a single alphanumeric code that meant nothing to anyone without Ultra 7 clearance. Neither had touched it since Ellison had placed it on the table 30 minutes earlier. The implications are significant. Ellison finally broke the silence, choosing his words with diplomatic precision. Verification protocols were comprehensive. Multiple intelligence services confirmed her death independently. He studied Declan with the calculated assessment of someone measuring how much truth another person could handle. The Santa Fe safe house explosion left DNA evidence, personal effects, witness statements, everything necessary for positive identification. Declan remained perfectly still, his posture reflecting neither tension nor relaxation, but absolute focus. The quiet bartender had completely receded, replaced by the cold precision of Ghost Rider, fully re-engaged. "And yet Anna Weiss exists," he stated, not a question but a confirmation of what he had already deduced from Ellison's reactions. Ellison's expression tightened slightly, the micro-expression of someone navigating classified compartmentalization. While determining necessary disclosure thresholds, there is an individual operating under that identity, he acknowledged carefully. First appeared in banking records approximately 16 months after the Santa Fe incident, currently employed as a research analyst at the Hoffman Institute in Denver. Specialization in financial cryptography and bank security. The specific details carried weight beyond mere identification. They described precisely the kind of cover position that intelligence services would establish for high-value assets requiring deep anonymity. More significantly, the specialization aligned perfectly with Amara's expertise before her apparent death. "Treasury has maintained surveillance?" Declan asked, the question carrying layers of meaning about institutional knowledge and operational jurisdiction. "Limited observation only," Ellison replied, his careful phrasing revealing boundaries of authorization rather than operational limitations. "The individual has never triggered established recognition protocols. Physical appearance differs significantly from Amara Kessler's documented parameters. Surgical alteration, not merely cosmetic modification. The distinction was crucial, suggesting whoever was living as Anna Weiss had undergone fundamental physical transformation beyond standard identity concealment techniques. Either this was someone else entirely constructed to resemble Amara, or Amara herself had been physically transformed to eliminate recognition possibility. Volkov knew, Declan observed, processing the operational implications, which means Russian intelligence maintains awareness that we don't. His psychological tactic wasn't random. It was calculated to trigger specific verification responses. The analysis was clinical, despite the personal stakes involved. Professional assessment of adversarial intelligence operations rather than emotional reaction. Ellison opened the file folder between them, revealing a surveillance photograph of a woman in her 30s with copper-red hair cut in a severe asymmetrical style, features sharper and more angular than Amara's had been, walking purposefully through a Denver street market. Nothing in her physical appearance immediately connected to the woman Declan had known, yet something in her posture, in the precise economy of her movements, triggered recognition beyond mere visual identification. "Taken 3 weeks ago," Ellison confirmed, watching Declan's reaction closely. "Routine surveillance during a separate operation, targeting financial channels, supporting weapons proliferation in Eastern territories. Her presence was incidental to primary objectives." The context explained how Treasury had maintained awareness of Anna Weiss without actively investigating her identity. She had appeared peripherally in unrelated operations. The Hoffman Institute maintains research contracts with financial institutions throughout the frontier, Ellison continued, providing operational context rather than personal reassurance, including several currently under Treasury investigation for violations related to Cherokee Territory technology transfers. The same network Dawson Ranch was facilitating through their Volkov trading partnerships. The connection crystallized. With perfect clarity, if Anna Weiss was positioned to monitor the same financial networks that Dawson Ranch had been facilitating, her presence in Treasury surveillance was inevitable once Ellison's investigation expanded to include those Denver banking connections. The operational intersection wasn't coincidence, but institutional alignment. Who knows? Declan asked, the question encompassing complex security implications beyond personal concern. If Amara was alive but operating under deep cover, knowledge of her survival carried significant operational risks for both her mission and her safety. Compartmentalized to Ultra 7 clearance, Ellison replied, confirming the extraordinarily limited distribution. Myself, Director Langford, potentially 3 others at equivalent clearance levels. The restrictive classification indicated exceptional sensitivity, operational intelligence so volatile that even confirmation of its existence was limited to the highest authorization levels. And now Volkov, Declan added, identifying the critical security breach, which means Russian intelligence services have penetrated whatever operational parameters surrounded her deployment. The implication was significant, not merely that Amara might be alive, but that her cover had been compromised at the highest levels of adversarial intelligence. Ellison's expression revealed reluctant agreement with this assessment. The question becomes motive, he observed, shifting from confirmation to analysis. Why reveal this intelligence during a tactical operation where verification was impossible? What strategic advantage does exposing this knowledge provide Russian intelligence? The question cut to the heart of the matter. In the ruthlessly pragmatic world of intelligence operations, even emotional manipulation served specific strategic objectives. Volkov's revelation hadn't been spite or cruelty, but calculated operational leverage. Recruitment, Declan concluded, the realization emerging with absolute clarity. They've identified me despite 5 years of deep cover. Now they're offering access to Amara as incentive for cooperation. The assessment wasn't emotional, but tactical, recognizing a sophisticated intelligence operation designed to compromise a high-value former operative through personal vulnerability, or creating a vulnerability they previously lacked, Ellison suggested, the alternative equally plausible. If you believed Amara dead, you were effectively insulated from emotional leverage. By introducing doubt about her status, they create an exploitable pressure point regardless of the actual truth. This counter-analysis reflected the labyrinthine thinking of intelligence operations. Sometimes the mere suggestion of possibility created more effective manipulation than actual facts. Declan rose from his chair with fluid precision, moving to the room's single window, a reinforced panel that had been shuttered for security, but provided a vague impression of dawnlight filtering through. His reflection was ghostly against the surface, the familiar features of the bartender he'd been, for 5 years now, carrying the unmistakable presence of the operative he'd been before. Either way, my cover is compromised, he stated, acknowledging the operational reality without emotion. The broken spur, Olivia's operation, 5 years of constructed identity, all exposed once Volkov identified me. The assessment wasn't self-pity but tactical calculation, recognizing that fundamental operational parameters had changed regardless of his personal preferences. Yes, Ellison agreed without pretense. Measured exposure currently, limited to Russian intelligence and potentially Zephyr gang through Karlov's awareness. But operational security principles suggest comprehensive identity compromise within 6 months, as information propagates through intelligence channels. The timeline was optimistic but realistic. Intelligence communities maintained certain professional courtesies about exposed assets, allowing reasonable extraction windows before leveraging compromised identities for operational advantage. 6 months was the standard grace period for high-value operatives to establish new cover parameters before becoming active targets. "I need operational authority," Declan said finally, turning from the window to face Ellison directly. "Full parameters, independent action, dedicated resources." The request wasn't emotional but professional, a formal application for mission authorization from someone who understood exactly what he was asking and what it would require. Ellison studied him silently for several moments, weighing complex factors beyond the immediate situation. "Reactivating your operational status carries significant implications," he observed carefully. "Your separation was definitive, approved at the highest level specifically because of the Santa Fe incident. Re-engagement would require exceptional justification. Anton Karlov has offered intelligence exchange," Declan replied, producing a secure communication device that hadn't been in his possession during the debriefing. "Zephyr gang has independent verification of Anna Weiss's identity and activities. Operational cooperation in exchange for specific considerations regarding their Cherokee intelligence." The revelation demonstrated that Declan had maintained operational capabilities beyond what Ellison had assumed. Private communications with Karlov established without Treasury awareness or authorization. Ellison's expression tightened momentarily. Recognition that Declan had already initiated operational parameters without formal sanction. Unsanctioned contact with a known foreign asset constitutes significant breach of protocol, he noted, though his tone suggested professional assessment rather than reprimand. "We're beyond protocols," Declan responded simply. Volkov's team wasn't implementing standard sanitization operations. They were specifically targeting Maya Delgado's treasury evidence while extracting Dawson Ranch's operational data for Russian intelligence. The larger network remains active despite tonight's exposure. The assessment was accurate. The night's events had disrupted one node in a sophisticated international financial network, but the broader infrastructure remained operational. Moreover, if Anna Weiss was positioned within that same network, either monitoring it officially or compromised, within it, the operational imperatives extended beyond standard Treasury jurisdiction. "What exactly are you proposing?" Ellison asked, his tone shifting from assessment to potential authorization, the subtle transformation of a senior intelligence official moving from evaluation to operational planning. 3-phase operation, Declan outlined with methodical precision. First, controlled extraction of Anna Weiss from Denver to determine her actual identity and status. Second, penetration of the financial network she's been positioned to monitor, leveraging Karlov's intelligence and Treasury's existing investigation. Third, identification and neutralization of Volkov's operational infrastructure before he can implement counter-responses. The proposal was comprehensive and tactically sound, combining immediate personal objectives with broader intelligence imperatives that justified institutional resources. More importantly, it provided Ellison with sufficient official justification to authorize reactivation despite the irregular circumstances surrounding Declan's separation. Ellison considered silently, weighing operational necessities against institutional protocols. After a measured pause, he reached a decision with the definitive clarity of someone accustomed to making high-consequence determinations. Provisional authorization granted, he stated formally. Operational parameters restricted to intelligence. Gathering and asset extraction initially. Expanded authorization contingent upon verification of primary intelligence regarding Anna Weiss's actual identity. The conditional approval was both pragmatic and prudent, authorizing the personal objective that would inevitably drive Declan's actions regardless of official sanction, while maintaining institutional control over subsequent operational phases. Pending verification of critical intelligence, Sullivan has requested assignment as operational liaison, Ellison added, the information significant beyond mere personnel logistics. Her involvement provides official Treasury oversight while maintaining operational continuity from last night's engagement. The arrangement offered Declan a trusted operational partner while satisfying institutional requirements for proper chain of command. Dr. Winters? Declan inquired, recognizing the importance of maintaining his established operational support network despite the compromised cover identity. Transitioning to authorized operational support under medical consultation parameters, Ellison confirmed. Her previous clearance levels have been provisionally restored for this specific engagement. The authorization reflected recognition that effective operations required trusted support personnel beyond primary operatives. And Olivia? Declan asked, this question carrying personal concern beyond operational considerations. The broken spur had been more than a cover location. It had been Olivia's legitimate business, despite its secondary function as a security installation. Compensation authorized for operational compromise, Ellison replied with unexpected understanding. Her cooperation last night has been classified as voluntary civilian assistance to federal operations, qualifying for comprehensive coverage of all associated costs and relocation assistance if required. The arrangement was unusually generous by Treasury standards, suggesting Ellison recognized the personal connections beyond mere operational assets. As dawn fully emerged beyond the shuttered windows, Declan made his final decision, not with dramatic declaration, but with the quiet certainty that had always characterized his most consequential choices. The unassuming bartender with the unnaturally steady hands hadn't been merely a cover identity, but a genuine attempt at finding peace after Santa Fe. That peace had now been irrevocably shattered, not just by last night's events, but by the possibility that its very foundation had been built on either deception or manipulation. Operational clock begins now, he stated, formally accepting the mission parameters and all they entailed. Denver insertion within 72 hours, Sullivan as operational partner, Dr. Winters as medical support. Karlov exchange to be implemented. At secure frontier location of his choosing following initial verification of Anna Weiss's identity. Ellison nodded, accepting the operational framework with professional acknowledgement of Declan's expertise, despite the personal elements driving the mission. Authorization codes will be transmitted through secured channels. Operational designation, Dust Phantom. As Declan prepared to depart for immediate mission preparation, Ellison asked one final question, not as a Treasury official, but as someone who had known Ghost Rider before Santa Fe, before the tragedy that had transformed him into an unassuming bartender with unwavering hands. If it is her, if Amara somehow survived, what then? The question acknowledged the human element beneath the operational parameters, the personal stakes that transcended institutional objectives and tactical necessities. Declan paused at the threshold, his expression revealing nothing of the emotional currents beneath his professional composure. Then I'll finally know whose ghost I've been serving whiskey to for the past 5 years, he replied. The quiet bartender's voice briefly emerging through the operational persona before disappearing once more beneath the focused precision of Ghost Rider re-engaged. As he departed the debriefing room, security lookouts tracked his movement through the facility, his posture, his awareness, his absolute focus, all reflecting the legendary gunslinger rather than the bartender he'd been just 24 hours earlier. The transformation was complete, the resurrection of an identity that had never truly been abandoned, but merely submerged beneath 5 years of meticulously polished glassware and perfectly mixed drinks. The ranchers who had mocked the quiet bartender at the Broken Spur could never have imagined how their casual cruelty would cascade into international intelligence operations, financial conspiracy exposure, and the re-emergence of a legend the intelligence community had presumed retired, if not dead. By challenging the wrong bartender, they had inadvertently triggered events that would now ripple through the shadowed corridors of global intelligence agencies and the clandestine networks of illicit frontier operations. As Declan stepped into the morning sunlight, his eyes adjusted with characteristic precision to the changed illumination. The world looked different now, not just because he was viewing it once again through the operational perspective of Ghost Rider, but because the fundamental narrative he had constructed about his past had been called into question. If Amara lived, everything changed. If she didn't, then Volkov had implemented one of the most sophisticated psychological operations in modern intelligence history. Either way, the quiet bartender with the steady hands had served his last drink. The most feared gunslinger in Western history had returned, his focus locked on a copper-haired woman in Denver, who might be a stranger wearing a familiar name or the ghost whose memory had driven him from the field 5 years earlier. The only certainty was that someone, somewhere, would soon discover the deadly mistake of awakening a legend they had believed safely buried behind a bar, polishing glasses with unnaturally steady hands. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.